Chapter 316. Yin Wu Tian clenched his teeth and stared at the hideous scar on King-level Master Jun's belly. He cursed in his heart, "Motherfucker, why couldn't I have used a little more strength to open your chest when you were my opponent? You left behind such a scourge. I'm so angry now, do as you wish." Yin Wu Tian clenched his teeth and spat out these two words. Then, he turned his head. "Of course, do as you wish. Don't tell me you want to order me around." Jun Qingyang laughed loudly. He jumped up like a big white fish and fell into the water. The sky was already dark. Yin Wu Tian roared towards the sky. His chest, which was about to explode, finally calmed down a little. "Go." Yin Wu Tian angrily ordered. "This. Sir, it's already dark. The underwater mud of the Lotus Lake is very dangerous. Sir, go down by yourself." "Let's wait," a fisherman timidly suggested. "Who cares if he dies?" Yin Wu Tian furiously said, "It's good if he drowns. Go, 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 go." He took out a few silver ingots and drove the crowd away. Then, he angrily returned to his tent. He picked up a jar of wine and drank half of it. Then, he roared, "No one is allowed to go near the water. If you hear anything, just pretend that you didn't hear anything. Do you understand?" His subordinates were confused. But, the king-level master was angry. So, who would dare to provoke him? They wisely chose not to ask. The hidden sentries at the lakeside withdrew. Anyway, the Lotus Lake was still under control. So, there wouldn't be any big chaos. In fact, many people didn't understand why they were monitoring the Lotus Lake. Sure enough, King-level Master Jun Qingyang came out of the lake after a while. He hoarsely roared, "Come, some people." Yin Wu Tian heard this. He sneered and said in a low voice, "Fuck you." He ignored him. King-level Master Jun shouted again, "Fuck you." "Is everyone dead?" There was still no movement. "Where are they? Fuck. Where are they?" King-level Master Jun angrily yelled. Yin Wu Tian ignored him. King-level Master Jun submerged into the water again with a splash. Yin Wu Tian laughed complacently. He ordered again, "Hide further away." King-level Master Jun came out with a crashing sound after a while. "How many people have come here, you bastard? Fuck. Where the hell are they?" He hooted for a while, but no one paid him any attention. He cursed angrily for a while, then with a splash, he sank back into the lake. While Chu Yang was sinking into the Lotus Lake, Diwu Qingru was holding the most important military meeting in his life. In the Prime Minister's manor, Wei Sen-Xie was on guard duty every 3 steps and a sentry every 5 steps. The sky and earth in a large turned upside down. Fierce generals the person had already gone far away. It was like a little girl craving toys gradually she was all gathered in one place, looking forward to the arrival of the great Zhao and that feeling gathered behind his back was so clear. Suddenly, a sharp sound of water exchanged with petty tricks. Except for the several large legions he saw that a few of those strange snakes had already turned into high-ranking military officers had been summoned back and rushed over. Chu Yang was like a big fish. Everyone had a mouth silently inside. There were dense part of the Prime Minister gathering. They looked ferocious almost and terrifying due to Chu Yang's when this expect was thrown out over, it would many people had been evacuated from the world. They would attack him. Therefore, Chu Yang had dived into the water after he rushed over several times in a round. A silvery cross those who arrived early had already slipped from the shallow water in all the Prime Minister's manor, turning in a strong summoning everywhere. The furthest from the bottom of the water and immediately rushed back. 7 snakes were cut into several pieces and were exhausted on the tribulation. But when he arrived, Dragon found out that after the sword illuminated his body, as soon as Chu Yang knew that Diwu Qingru's solemn face gave everyone although he wasn't afraid of coming. Continuously didn't want these a dozen everyone here to talk until he reached the top of the strange dragon knocked on the table. The next moment, in an instant, they were densely packed. Everyone laughed. They came from all directions, one after another. Top of his head, Han Bi Chu sat at the front of the wall. The diving in his hand pulled out much easier than the last. The sword directly across from everyone roared angrily with a buoyancy suddenly. a huge extremely cold current. He had already outsped a cloud on the map. Moreover, the eyes of martial power had advanced, and their body had advanced by 4 big steps. Once the cold energy came out, as he walked the sky into the water, his deep eyes looked at every area melting several hundred feet. Today, I called everyone all over his body, to make fight with your lives flood dragons. Everyone held their breath, and their eyes could not I can do whatever I want. Sword tipped his eyes wide open, all the way down. More than a dozen shining vaguely shot big fish suddenly turned around and pointed at gracefully swimming in the water. Tens of thousands of nations on the map. Group of small shouted, "Rush everyone!" His vision became more on their way into the heart of Iron Cloud. It became darker, with not too far away. Finally, there was still that strange wall and that strange pearl. Although no one moved muscles, the boiling fighting spirit in the hall was lightly narrowed his eyes. He opened his arms. Almost and an invisible stream of energy like a flag of great Jiao on top of frozen ice was around the sky. Quietly melted for several hundred frozen bodies of the poisonous light gradually lightened and sank down. Chu Young's heart held Chu swept away by the untied reunion and bring him to turned out that under the extreme cold energy questions whether until the dragons had died of violent death several times stronger than the one along with an everyone clenched the tip of the calamity heavily let out. Their eyes were filled with a ferociously moved along his right like a wild body of the sword. At the same time, it turned into a silver light and slowly poisonous flood dragon. When it reached the tip of the sword, this battle was such a big mouth. The scabbard suddenly rushed out and directly it he had ever seen 10,000 years. The combat seemed everyone below was poisonous strong dragon forever be passed down in Chongtian continent. It wouldn't even hiccup. You will become a legend. As for the war horses, this battle's mouth was big enough to accommodate 3 war horses at the same time. This battle will determine who will rise and fall in the Tao of the firmament. Said in his heart, one ray of cold light is enough to cover 10,000 feet. Bewitchment in Calamity soared crazily used thoroughly aroused the fighting spirit of these men. Prime Minister didn't even finish one move. A general with a curly beard could not harm is there in slaughtering the entire world. Please give the order. His body. The crowd was stirred up, and everyone in one breath. He executed another 2 moves. Eyes sharp filled with disdain will never be changed. He looked around and announced in a deep voice, clouds to become the emperor. Will personally go to the battlefield and lead the 3 armies. Time. Boom. The sword light everyone shouted excitedly, and the poisonous flood dragon. The Prime Minister will personally go to the battlefield. In extreme pain. In an instant, the scene of following the shining sword light and winning every battle flashed in front of their eyes. Chu Yang was startled. This legendary military sword light of a calamity sword, a peerless general, saw that the flesh in this big guy's mouth was already dripping with blood. This large chunks of flesh were falling down. A 40 to 50-year-old official teeth in its mouth were extremely sturdy. The sword stockpiled with provisions of all the prefectures and immediately transported them to the northwest. It didn't break. The more, Chu Yang leaped backwards. There must be and shot out like a water arrow. Yes. The poisonous flood dragon seemed to have been provoked. It chased after him. Everything has been prepared. Although the calamity sword was sharp, it was too small. This battle is such a big poisonous flood dragon. If there is a problem in any aspect, couldn't even be compared to a entire great Jiao will be consigned to much damage to it. No matter who it hilt was inserted, as long as there is a little carelessness, injure its internal organs without mercy. Chu Yang had comprehended the horses have already been tamed. Together with their cavalry, he would have been in from this guy's stomach by now. Head north, in its stomach. Remember, just as Chu Yang thought of this, his eyes suddenly lit up. This guy's skin looked at another person. Even the calamity sword would need a lot of strength to be all the weapons in reserve. I can only have a chance to damage its mouth when it opens its mouth to attack me. Yet, the results are minimal. This lowly if I continue to fight like this, from today onwards, this guy can't catch me. All the doctors I'm afraid and soldiers of the great Jiao Empire. But it couldn't possibly have such hard scales without mercy, could it? Exterminated. Chu Yang began to size up this guy's mouth. Face immediately broke out in cold sweat. This guy doesn't seem to pay attention to hygiene. Even in the water, at his face, he can smell that strange smell in his mouth. There is no problem. Fine. The official quivered and felt the eyes of wolves and tigers looking at him. At this time, he was so scared already that he almost peed thousands of feet. Official the poisonous flood dragon's body was completely floating in the water. The Ministry of Revenue's money, stretching including the nation's treasury, the treasury, it was a full and the various reserves. Chu Yang had already slashed its head hundreds of times. It's impossible for this battle to end in one go. Its ferocious nature. It is very likely that it will take a long time. Its mouth was open, and its eyes were shining fiercely. The taxes of the entire great Jiao Empire will be doubled. in its long life. Used for this battle.
Was the first time
After
it had
this
suffered
battle,
such a serious
taxes
injury.
will be exempted.
This
for
made
3
its heart
years.
full of anger towards this.
Newbies,
and like human
the time
to
train.
Finally,
as the
after dozens
troops
of attacks had no
prepared
effect,
to set out at
it
any
seemed
time.
to understand
After
that
that,
such simple attacks couldn't cause any harm to issue orders. After all,
pre-war
its body was too
came
big
out
and
of his mouth
inflexible,
one by one,
and
they
the
were
other
extremely
party was very cunning
and detailed.
So
they
it
only
cleverly
needed to
changed
follow
its strategy.
Diwu-Qingru's
The
orders.
water flow
They did
suddenly
not even
stopped.
need to do everything
Then,
in
a
order
fierce
to
suction
prepare
force
everything
came
for this
towards
battle.
War
In
is
a
money.
situation where it couldn't catch up,
said softly,
the poisonous
all
flood
of these
dragon
things are
finally
money.
displayed
Without
its innate
money,
ability.
there is no way
Suck.
to fight.
It sucked
So,
this guy
Silver,
into its mouth
you must
and
be
bit him.
prepared to the
This was
extreme.
an indiscriminate
King-level
attack.
leader Jing,
Like
golden
moths
horse
darting
riders
into a
department
flame,
stockpile
all tiny
must also be
poisonous
taken
flood
out.
dragons in the
Jing
surrounding
Meng
area
Hun
flew
hurriedly
towards the
replied,
mouth of the beast.
Yes.
The
This
coordination
guy
of
seemed
the
to be
rear
used
will
to
be
eating
handed
its own
over to
grandson.
Han Biyu-Chu
It didn't
and
care
Chen
at all.
Yunhe.
Its eyes were only
looking
looking
at
at
Chu
Chu
Yang
and held it
sure
in his
enough,
hand.
Chu
This
Yang's
jade
body
is my
suddenly
personal
stopped in the
keepsake.
water.
If this
Then,
jade is here,
he seemed to
then
be
I
in
am
a hurry
here.
to retreat.
If anyone dares
The
to
poisonous
disobey
flood
and
dragon
not do their
was
best,
overjoyed.
the two of you
It
can
opened
kill
its
them at
mouth
any
even
time.
wider.
After that,
It didn't
there is no
hesitate
need
to
to
use
use
a
a
stronger
stronger
suction
suction
force.
force. Han
Closer,
Biyu-Chu and
even
Chen
closer.
Yunhe both stood
You're
up
going
and
to
took
be
a
my
step
meal
forward.
soon.
They
The
respectfully
poisonous flood
received
dragon's
this
eyes
jade
emitted
token
a
that
cruel
represented
light.
the highest
It had
authority
lived under
in
the
Great
water
Jiao.
all its life.
Biyu-Chu,
It had never
Yunhe,
gone up.
You should know.
And
it
the
had never
stability of the
eaten
rear
such a
is the
strange
most
food.
important
This
condition
made
for
it look
defeating
forward
the
to
enemy.
the coming meal.
Diwu-Qingru
It was
said
already at
seriously
the
and
edge of its
seriously.
mouth.
So
The
there must
poisonous
not be
flood
any
dragon
chaos
let
in the
out
rear.
an excited roar.
Understood. Then,
Rest
it
assured
felt that this
Prime
guy
Minister,
was finally
the
eaten
two
in
of
its
us
mouth.
are willing to
It
sacrifice
almost
our
couldn't
lives
wait
to live up to
its
Prime
upper
Minister's
and lower
trust.
rows of teeth
Very
suddenly
good.
closed together.
Biyu-Chu
No,
and the military
it seemed
generals,
that,
when
stay
it was
here.
at the edge of
The
its
rest
mouth,
of you can
this
go
guy
out
suddenly
and prepare.
rushed in with great
Diwu-Qingru
cooperation.
waved his hand.
In a flash,
Yes,
it drilled into
everyone
its stomach
knew that
from
what
its
they were
mouth.
about to
Crack.
discuss was the
The
real
poisonous
secret.
flood dragon
Even if a
roared
little
towards
was
the
leaked,
sky. It was
its
enough to
upper
affect
and lower
the
rows
outcome
of
of the
teeth
battle.
fiercely
No
collided
one was
together.
curious about this
However,
matter.
it didn't
The
bite
less
anything.
they knew, the
Instead,
better.
one of
Jing
its
Meng
teeth,
Hun, which had been cut by the
in
calamity
Li
sword
Jin
dozens
song
of
Beyond
times,
the Heavens,
broke off with
to
a
begin the
cracking
operation
sound.
immediately.
It was too sad
Yes.
and indignant.
Jing Meng Hun
this
immediately
hateful creature,
replied,
Lord
Right
Poisonous
now,
Jiao
Li
Dragon
Jin's
song
thought
is not of much
hatefully.
use.
No matter
but
what,
to a certain
it was eaten
extent,
by me.
he can disrupt
Maybe the day
Taibi
after
Tian's
tomorrow,
line of sight.
or maybe I don't have to wait
Diwu-Qingru
until
said
tomorrow.
casually.
This
Also,
guy will become my
send out a
excrement.
letter.
It had
Use my
finally
name to
eliminated
summon
this
all the
troublesome
sects of
guy.
Great Jiao
The
to
poisonous
participate
flood
in the
dragon
battle.
moved its
Yes.
body contentedly.
In addition,
it
Du
was
Shiqing's
about to
family
gracefully
should play their
return to
role.
its residence.
Diwu-Qingru
Suddenly,
said
a
casually.
strange pain came from its stomach.
Chapter
Then,
3:17
this pain became more and more
Don't
intense.
worry, Prime
In
Minister.
the end, it was
Even
almost
if we
like
die
an
a horrible
avalanche.
death,
The
he will
poisonous
sweep the
flood
world
dragon,
for Prime
which had
Minister.
just won,
All the
didn't
generals
even have
roared
time
in
to be
unison.
excited.
Everyone,
It
please
fell into
take
a
care of
state where
yourselves
it
for
wished
me.
it was dead.
For Great
When the
Jiao,
suction
for your
force was
family.
at its strongest,
Diwu-Qingru's
Chu Yang's
expression
suddenly
relaxed
relaxed his
solemn.
control over
He
his
held the
whole
flag
body.
and
His
bowed
body
deeply.
turned in a circle
Prime Minister,
and flew into the
someone
poisonous
couldn't
flood
help
dragon's
but
mouth
choke
with a
up.
whooshing
They
sound.
felt that even
This
if they had
wasn't
to die for
difficult
Prime
at all.
Minister Diwu,
This
they would
poisonous
have
flood
no
dragon's
complaints.
mouth was
Without
really
these,
too big.
you will have to pay
As
more.
mentioned earlier,
Diwu-Qingru
its mouth was
said
big enough to
seriously.
accommodate
Are you
3
sure?
horses
Are you
galloping in.
prepared?
Chu Yang's
Prime
body
Minister,
seems to
we
be
are
much
sure.
smaller than
We
the 3
must be
horses.
prepared.
After
Everyone
entering,
roared.
Chu Yang
As soldiers,
immediately rushed
we are
down.
ready to die on
He
the
felt
battlefield.
that he had entered a
soldier's
slippery and
death on the
sticky
battlefield.
He
Is the
didn't
best
hesitate
ending
in this life.
His long
Good.
sword moved
Diwu
forward and down.
Qingru's deep and
He used
dignified
all his
gaze
strength to
carried a
display the
trace of
calamity
strong
sword
reluctance
technique
and
in
an
this guy's
indescribable
stomach.
deep emotion.
One ray of
He
cold
looked at
light
everyone's
pierces
faces
10,000
one by one.
fathoms.
What
He was
harm
so
is there
careful,
in slaughtering
so
the entire
affectionate,
world?
yet so persistent
A sharp
and
will buried
resolute.
deep won't
Everyone
change.
had the same feeling
Gather
at the
the
same
wind
time.
and clouds
On the
to
morning
become
before
the
their
emperor.
first expedition,
A sword that
their
has
old
been
father
famous
stood at the
since
door and
ancient
gazed at them
times.
like this.
The wind
Full
and
of
clouds
reluctance
move
and love.
unhindered.
They vaguely
The sun
remembered
and
the
the
willows
willows and the wind of that
lightning
year,
general.
the sand
The
and
sky
dust of
is
the ancient
blood red.
path.
Today,
Yang
the
used
wind
the
was
8
still
moves
blowing.
of the
The
calamity
willows
sword
were still
technique
swaying
to the best
and
of
the
his
sand
ability.
and dust of the
This
ancient
kind of
path was
behavior
still
was
floating.
almost equivalent
From time
to
to time,
madness.
it would float
However,
into their eyes
Chu
and
Yang
turn
still
into
felt
sour
that he
tears.
wasn't crazy
But
enough.
that white-haired
His
old
body
father,
slid down
where
a
was
bit
he?
after he had
Wu
continuously
Qingru's
displayed
gaze
the
stirred
8
up the
moves of the
deepest
sword
part of their
technique.
hearts.
So,
It was the
he
softest
continued
part
to
of their
brandish his
hearts
long
that
sword.
belonged to their loved
The first
ones.
8 moves
Everyone's
of the calamity
gaze
sword
quietly met
technique were
Wu
repeatedly
Qingru's gaze,
displayed twice,
and they suddenly felt
then
moved
he
and
stopped.
warm in their hearts.
It was boring.
In an
At
instant,
this time,
the hall
power
where the
of the
generals
first 8
gathered
moves
before
of
the
the sword
expedition
technique
was suddenly
crazily
filled with
condensed
warmth
and exploded in the
Wu
poisonous
Qingru's
flood
slowly
dragon's
swept
stomach.
his gaze around.
Calamity sword
He
technique,
didn't hesitate on
overlapping
anyone's
heaven's
face,
sword technique.
but everyone had the same
This was
feeling.
the kind of
Prime
marvelous
Minister.
calamity sword technique
He seemed to have
that a
deeply
low-level
wedged
revered
us
sword
into his own
artist
heart.
could force
We will
Duke Yu
never
to a
forget.
draw. Everyone who hadn't tasted had their eyes turn red moves in a row. At the same time,
but now
he felt a stifling flood dragon was enjoying all of it. A huge power was boiling, exploded like a bomb in the poisonous flood dragon's weakest body with a loud bang. Uncomfortable. Tens of thousands of sword lights. I will announce the battle plan blood of the exploded and the locations where each army will be stationed. 2 places below also exploded and with a loud bang at almost the same time. The internal organs of the poisonous flood dragon, but everyone could hear it clearly in this pin-drop silence in the hall. However, the scales on the outside at the entrance of the hall. These things couldn't get out. Who were about to set out fell down one by one in a line and turned into every general who walked in front of him was submerged in it and solemnly saluted held his breath and rushed forward just stood there like this. But no matter who it was, he would always pat knocked on his shoulder and say a few words. Chu Yang didn't expect that he would be attacked. I remember the first time I met Dragon's stomach. You were still running away with and took a look. It turned out to be around the first commander of 100,000 man army. To call it a bead because this thing looked like a little eagle. I remember that I was the one who gave you this nickname and emitted a soft white light. Back then, you were training held it in his hand on the top of the mountain and immediately felt that it contained a huge amount of pure spirit energy. Iron rod, this bastard. Even now, his body is still like an iron rod. This guy's inner core eyes were full of emotion as he looked at the generals who were walking out one by one. How could this one be inside its stomach with each of them? Chu Yang was casually called out their nicknames. Felt dizzy. Without thinking, his body shook violently. It seemed as if this person's information and appearance were engraved in his life. Every person who had been patted on the shoulder by him swallowing a creature felt as if this never seen before would suddenly injected an inexplicable power into them. This explosion their hearts tremble violently. Flesh and blood in its body. The Prime Minister still remembers me, even though it had suffered such fatal injuries. He began to tumble and scurry about in the water. He still remembers what I did for him. It had circled around the bottom of the water several times in the blink of an eye. Would pat my shoulder. The underwater world had been turned into a mess by it in an instant. The Prime Minister patted my shoulder in those days, scuttled upwards like a hidden dragon. Blood and minced flesh were flowing out of its mouth as it frantically ran for its life. Nay, tilde, the pearl-like eyes had become dim on its hind legs. However, a general hadn't gone more than 2,000 feet when it suddenly lost its life. He only used his legs to control the horse. Its huge body suddenly stopped when it was about to emerge from the water's surface. He clasped his hands together and said wide open with a solemn face, it sank down with a hoo after today's farewell. However, this general will wait for the Prime Minister's personal expedition at the northern border to surge upwards. When the time comes, the blood of millions of ironclad soldiers will go with the Prime Minister's king-level expert Jun's ghost-like howling for a long time, having faded away when the horse turned around in the air. When its front hooves landed on the ground, resentment it had already turned around perfectly. Where can I find the lotus roots were like in the middle of the leaving the bowstring? Isn't that a joke? The figure on the horse's back do anything without anyone's help. It was majestic. I can only watch him soak in the water until he turns into a white-skinned chicken in the middle of the night. The second person followed. There hadn't been any movement since the last time he had heard the cry. His leave for the time being. The surface of the water was extremely calm. The northern border Yin Wu Tian's heart was somewhat perturbed. It was impossible to breathe underwater. Personally behead even with Yin Wu Tian's king-level cultivation. I asked the Prime Minister to celebrate with me underwater. This wasn't related to the depth of one's martial power. The sound of the human being would always have to breathe. However, this king-level master John had already been under the water for an hour. His demeanor was distant and upright. Motherfucker, he was like an old general that standing under a guy had drowned to death. He was drowning with the king-level expert in such tranquil water. His loyal subordinates go to gather the troops. It was absolutely when they meet impossible. Again, the winds and clouds will change. He had no choice but to think this way. If he didn't come out within 2 hours, other than turning into a fish, it was impossible for a living person to do so. Therefore, Yin Wu Tian immediately became busy. Prime Minister Diwu had solemnly instructed me to properly entertain and protect this king-level expert June. This was related to his relationship with the Three Heavens bamboo. If he didn't like him, he could just ignore him for a while. Anyone could fight with him. But if he were to die, who knew how serious the consequences would be? Therefore, Yin Wu Tian waited for a while. But there was still no movement. So, he anxiously called everyone to go to the lakeside to search. However, no matter how hard he searched, he still couldn't find it even after searching through almost every single strand of water plant. Yin Wu Tian was caught unprepared. So many of his men had been waiting by the shore, but none of them had seen this master climb up. But, How could a living person disappear after jumping into the lake? Yin Wu-tian wanted to cry, but had no tears. Yin Wu-tian anxiously called for a few boats. Then, everyone climbed onto the boats and went to the surface of the water to search. He issued an order: pay attention. If there is a dead body floating on the surface of the lake, you must pull it up and take a look. Fourth Master Yin believed that this king-level expert Jun had drowned and turned into a water ghost. Suddenly, someone shouted, "King-level expert, there is movement in the center of the lake." Yin Wu-tian didn't need to say anything because he had also seen it because the movement wasn't small. The tranquil surface of the water suddenly churned up. The water level was like a huge fountain. It was almost 10 feet higher than the surrounding water surface. Yin Wu-tian stepped on Xiao Dan and urged his primary power to fly over. However, the water surface suddenly calmed down by the time he arrived. Yin Wu-tian had no choice but to drive Xiao Dan back and forth. Sure enough, a fountain rose not far away after a short time. Yin Wu-tian rushed over again, but there was no more. Yin Wu-tian felt as if his head was about to explode several times in a row. What's going on? Yin Wu-tian was puzzled when he suddenly felt the water surface under his feet turn violent. It was an unimaginably huge force. He couldn't help but turn pale with fright. However, it was too late to dodge. The huge power of the water flow suddenly rushed up from the bottom of the water like an angry dragon. Yin Wu-tian was caught off guard. So, he and his boat were lifted up into the sky like a rocket. The boat burst open with a bang, and the current hit Yin Wu-tian's buttocks. Yin Wu-tian let out a strange cry as he lay flat on the top of the wave. Then, he soared up 300 feet into the sky. Then, the water flow suddenly disappeared with a splashing sound. The fourth Master Yin stopped in midair like a person flying in the air. He stagnated for a short time before he fell down. The fourth Master Yin screamed strangely. His body was almost numb from the sudden attack of the water flow. He couldn't move. He looked at himself as he fell face down like a big flat cake. Bang! Water splashed everywhere. The fourth Master Yin fell on the water surface. His nose was bruised, and his face was swollen. He even had a nosebleed. He gulped down a few mouthfuls of water. His body recovered a little bit of his ability to move. He barely managed to raise his head above the water surface. He screamed miserably, "Help me!" Everyone was petrified. They rescued Yin Wu-tian on the boat. Then, everyone gathered around to study. What's going on? While they were studying, someone discovered something unusual. He cried out in alarm, "Look! What's that?" They saw a layer of strangely shaped corpses of small snakes floating on the water surface. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. There was no lack of knowledgeable people among them. But, they had never seen such strange snakes before. Choose a few good swimmers. Go underwater and check it out. Yin Wu-tian rubbed his belly. He was spitting out water as he ordered Juju. Right now, Sniper Chu was inspecting the spoils of the battle underwater. The poisonous flood dragon hadn't even finished its charge when it lost all its vitality and fell down. Its huge body was lying horizontally on the bottom of the water. The situation was quite spectacular. Chu Yang was covered in blood. He used his sword to support himself as he slowly crawled out of the poisonous flood dragon's mouth. He couldn't help but suck in a cold breath as he looked at its huge body. It's too big. 10,000 pounds. I'm afraid it's too big. This ferocious beast has lived for countless years. It can be said that its whole body is a treasure. How could Chu Yang be polite? First, he spun his long sword and unceremoniously dug out its 2 eyeballs. Then, he wiped off the blood on them. They were 2 huge snow-white pearls. They emitted a milky white radiance. They were as big as bowls, and perfectly round. Chu Yang dared to bet that there were only 2 pearls of this size in the entire Chongqian continent. Poisonous dragon's breath. Sword Spirit sighed and said, "It's the yin-yang poisonous dragon's eye. This is a priceless treasure." "Oh, what are the benefits of this poisonous dragon's eye?" Chu Yang asked modestly. "The benefits aren't very big. However, the yin-yang poisonous dragon's eye is priceless if you consider it as a pearl. There's another benefit. The poisonous dragon's eye is yin and yang complementary. It can cure all kinds of poisons in the world as long as they are put together. It can be said that it can't be cured without poison, Sword Spirit said indifferently. It can't be cured without poison? Chu Yang's eyes brightened. There are many uses for it. But, you need to slowly explore it later. I can only say that this thing is an absolute treasure. You mustn't deal with it casually, Sword Spirit said. Of course. Chu Yang immediately put one of them into the tribulation space, and put the other one on the poisonous flood dragon's body for illumination. He spat it on his hand. He raised his long sword, and fiercely chopped down on the poisonous flood dragon's head. Chu Yang had seen the sturdiness of the poisonous flood dragon's skin. So, he obviously used all his strength this time for fear that he wouldn't be able to cut it open. But, he didn't expect that his sword would cut it open with a sure sound. The poisonous flood dragon's body was cut into two from top to bottom. Chu Yang had used too much strength. So, he staggered. Hey, why is it so soft? Isn't it very sturdy? Chu Yang exclaimed in surprise. It has lost its vitality. So, it's obviously soft. Do you think it's invulnerable? Sword Spirit said disdainfully. He couldn't bear to see this guy making a fuss over nothing. Take a person for example. His skin is very tight when he's alive. But, how can it be so soft when he becomes a corpse? Fuck. What kind of analogy is this? Chu Yang was speechless. He was a little depressed. He had originally planned to take a few pieces of this poisonous flood dragon's scales, and make some soft armors for his brothers to wear. Then, wouldn't their lives be a little more secure? Chu Yang had been thinking about this ever since the tribulation sword couldn't cut it open. But, he hadn't expected that he would come up with an empty one. There was a fist-sized shiny crystal in the poisonous flood dragon's head. It was triangular in shape. Its three corners were very sharp. But, it was oval in the middle. This is the poisonous flood dragon's inner core. Sword Spirit said, such an inner core isn't very common in the upper three heavens. Moreover, it can be used to assist in cultivation. Especially for those soft water attribute martial arts. If they find this inner core of yours, I'm afraid they'll break their heads to snatch it. Keep it well. Don't let the tribulation sword devour it. I have a hunch that this poisonous flood dragon's inner core will give you unimaginable benefits in the upper three heavens. Sword Spirit smiled mysteriously. Hey, this is an inner core. Then, what is this? Chu Yang took out the round bead that he had smashed on his head in the poisonous flood dragon's belly, and asked. This is a priceless treasure. Sword Spirit sighed. It's a pity that your current cultivation is too low. So, you can't use it. He said in a somewhat envious tone, this is a concentrated and pure essence of heaven and earth. I see. Chu Yang had been wondering why he couldn't absorb even the slightest bit of spiritual energy when he clearly felt it. Chu Yang swam all the way back, and arrived in front of the low wall. That rare pearl was still embedded in it. Luminous pearl. A pure luminous pearl. Sword Spirit took a deep breath. If this pearl were to be auctioned in the upper three heavens, the auction price would be enough to buy a city in the lower three heavens. He smiled mischievously. As for the upper three heavens and the lower three heavens, no one would be able to afford it. Chu Yang didn't care about this kind of wealth. He casually picked it up, and threw it into the tribulation space. Chu Yang was about to cross the low wall when he suddenly heard a bang sound. The entire low wall broke, and then disappeared like a bubble. A burst of dazzling white light was emitted from the place where the low wall had originally been. A burst of fiendish aura surged out violently. It was a kind of pleasant surprise of a long-awaited reunion. Chapter 320. In Chu Yang's dantian, sword point and sword brocade started to clamor at the same time. One sneakily came out to spy on him, while the other flipped around in Chu Yang's dantian. Their excitement was beyond words. Chu Yang walked over lightly and reached out his hand toward the broken sword. Just as he stretched out his hand, the broken sword automatically jumped up and landed in his palm. The light flashed twice. It seemed as if it was greeting Chu Yang. But, it also seemed as if it was blinking happily. Then, it disappeared. It disappeared inexplicably in Chu Yang's palm, like snowflakes melting in high temperature. And Chu Yang's dantian was already in a mess. The newly arrived sword point and sword edge looked as if they had been reunited with each other after a long time. Chu Yang could clearly feel the joy in their eyes. After a long while, it slowly merged into Chu Yang's dantian and became one with sword edge and sword edge. Chu Yang's dantian emitted a gentle white light and then slowly weakened. By the time it disappeared, the three parts had become one without any gap. The sword edge of the Calamity Sword. In terms of sword body, one front and one back, monarch, minister, assistant, and envoy. The front part was the sword edge and the back part was the sword edge. Sword point, sword edge, and sword edge were all used for killing. When these three parts were put together, the three parts with the greatest killing power were gathered. The sword edge is the second half of the sword body. It is the most fragile part of the sword body and the easiest to break. The most commonly used attacking methods are cutting, lifting, sealing, and holding. Technique is the main part and strength is the secondary part. In Chu Yang's consciousness, the sword spirit let out a long chant. Chu Yang seemed to understand something, but also seemed to not understand. His mind suddenly felt confused. The next moment, his head felt heavy and his feet felt light. There was a sharp pain in his head that lasted for a long time. Chu Yang's entire head felt as if it was about to split open. He couldn't help but hold his head with both hands and yell at the sky. A stream of air came out of his mouth, causing the water above his head to ripple. Pain. You have to bear with it. This is the most difficult moment for the Calamity Sword to recognize its master. Because the first three parts that you put away are mainly used for killing, from today onwards, the entire heavenly layer will be filled with endless killing. The sword spirit said, and from today onwards, the Calamity Sword will go through a storm of blood in the world. The souls that die under the sword will never be reincarnated, and Jiamping will not shed a single drop of blood. In other words, from today onwards, the Calamity Sword will have an additional function. It can be considered a method for the Calamity Sword to repair itself. It can also be considered a benefit for its owner, that is, devouring the power of living beings. This is the power of a demon. It is also the end of the cycle of reincarnation. The sword spirit's voice suddenly stopped. But Chu Yang finally understood the origin of this pain. He tightly clenched his teeth and coldly snorted. Then, he said through gritted teeth, "Is there any kind of suffering in this world that I, Chu Yang, cannot endure?" What a joke! As he spoke, he looked up to the sky and roared, "Come on, let's see if you hurt me to death, or if I conquer you." Ha ha ha! The pain in his head came wave after wave, like the waves of the sea. It was endless, and each wave was higher than the previous one. His flesh and blood seemed to be cut off at the same time, and his meridians seemed to be broken at the same time. However, the nerves of pain seemed to be artificially magnified by 100 times. This kind of pain was crueler than any punishment in the world. It was unbearable. But, after Chu Yang roared that sentence, he actually did not make a single sound. He endured it with all his might. The veins on his temples were about to fly out, and his eyes were about to pop out. Even the skin at the corners of his eyes was slowly tearing apart, and blood flowed out. Chu Yang clenched his fists tightly, and his fingernails had already dug deep into his flesh. His entire body was trembling, but he refused to let out another cry no matter what. Even if I die from the pain, I, Chu Yang, disdain to make a sound. Death is not something that I have not experienced before. Calamity Sword, what are you? No matter how awesome you are just a sword. You can only acknowledge me as your master. How can I lose to you? What a joke! Chu Yang roared in his heart. The pain was getting more and more intense. But Chu Yang still endured it. He could faint without feeling it, or it could be said that it would lessen. This was not stipulated. But Chu Yang was ruthless. I have to endure it with a clear mind. Even if I die, I have to die with a clear mind. Countless times, when he was on the verge of collapse and was about to faint, Chu Yang roared in his heart, "Chu Yang, hold on. Qing Wu is waiting for you." Qing Wu said that she was prettier than the sword. She was prettier than any sword. Prettier than the Calamity sword. Thinking of that graceful figure in red with a face full of hidden bitterness in his previous life, Chu Yang's heart was in so much pain that it overturned rivers and seas. This kind of spiritual pain actually suppressed the test of the Calamity sword's possession for a moment. Thinking of that small and delicate figure in red in this life, Chu Yang did not know what kind of torture she was suffering at this moment, and his heart was unbearable. I just have to endure it. I can save her. I have to save her. Qing Wu, wait for me. This kind of intense pain actually lasted for nearly a quarter of an hour. Chu Yang's whole body was sweating from the pain, and in the end, there were traces of bright red blood. After that, this intense pain suddenly stopped. When it came, it was like a landslide, but when it left, it was also incomparably straightforward. A moment ago, it was like a tsunami, and the next moment, the entire sea surface had frozen. The bottom of the frozen sea. Chu Yang had not even recovered from his shock when he felt as if there was a bright flash of lightning wedged straight into his mind. A thick white fog suddenly appeared in the space of his consciousness, whistling and spiraling. Then, 28 large blood-red words, carrying boundless hostility and boundless killing intent, suddenly broke through the clouds like lightning, flashing out of the thick white fog. 28 words slowly appeared and circled in his mind. Blood-red and dazzling, each word was like a sea of blood in the netherworld, like the eyes of a demon, flashing. A blade across the sky for 10,000 autumns. This road leads to the netherworld. Severing the lovers of the mortal world. Everywhere the sharp edge goes, everything ends. These 4 words of the sword technique were also similarly filled with murderous intent. Chu Yang closed his eyes, and felt the exhaustion in his body. He let out a long breath. The sword spirit had already started to use a large amount of elixirs to heal the injuries on Chu Yang's body. As he repaired the sword technique, he also sighed in his heart. How many years had it been? When going through this stage, some sword masters had fainted from the pain, some had rolled around in pain, some had screamed, and some had even lost their minds from the pain and bit off one of their fingers. But no one had ever been able to face it like this. He had been awake all this time, and had not made a sound. Had he endured it with his eyes wide open? Moreover, the pain this time was several times more intense than the previous 8 times. This guy was really ruthless. Not only was he ruthless to his enemies, but he was even more ruthless to himself. After a long time, Chu Yang found that he had regained the ability to move. His 5 fingers slowly closed, making cracking sounds. His eyes contained a deep and cold murderous intent. He shouted, "Come out." At his command, a long sword spontaneously appeared in his hand. The hilt and other parts of the sword were illusory, but the sword tip, sword edge, and sword blade were real. The dense murderous intent raged out in such an open and wild manner. As soon as this murderous intent appeared, the small fish, prawns, and snakes that were still around immediately scattered and fled in panic. This murderous intent seemed to be real. It was a real deterrent to all living things. The Calamity sword's body was silver white, revealing a murderous intent. With a light wave, a silver-white light flashed. Chu Yang clearly saw that the water in front of him was split into 2. It actually took a while for her to recover. Chu Yang couldn't help but be shocked. He didn't use any strength in this wave. But it was clear that it was like a dagger cutting through a piece of paper, and it was cut. This was too unbelievable. Drawing a sword to cut water. This had always been a legend used to describe the sharpness of a sword. Any expert would be able to split the water into 2 halves with a single slash of his saber. However, to be able to break the flow of water without using any strength at all, this was something that could only happen in legend. At least, the records in the heavenly continent were only legends, and there were no records of the real thing. But now, such a divine item had clearly appeared in his hand. Calamity sword. Looking at the wonders of the Calamity sword, Chu Yang sighed in disappointment. This was the Calamity sword. Then, what did he get in his previous life? Was he the Calamity sword master in his previous life? Or was he the Calamity sword slave? Or was he not even a sword slave, a nobody? Taking a deep breath, Chu Yang's gaze focused on the calamity sword's body. The sword's body was still silver-white and murderous. But after Chu Yang's gaze focused on it, this silver-white light gradually became gentler. That insufferably arrogant murderous intent also seemed to be gradually restrained. It was like an unparalleled demon king meeting his destined master. That kind of complete obedience from the soul to the body. Chu Yang looked at it without blinking. Finally, he felt that the calamity sword seemed to be carefully looking at him. The sword's body was slightly trembling, as if a little fellow was pitifully showing a fawning expression to its master. Then, the sword tip carefully slid out, gently stroking Chu Yang's hand, and hurriedly retracted. It continued to carefully fawn on him. Chu Yang's cold eyes did not move. The sword tip bent a few times, clearly showing an aggrieved look. The sword tip also slid down, also carefully touching Chu Yang's hand, and then retracted. Chu Yang still did not move. Then, it was the sword's blade. After a long time, it slowly came over and stroked Chu Yang's hand. The light in Chu Yang's eyes became colder and colder, faintly revealing a hint of hostility. He said indifferently in his mind, "If you don't obey me, I'd rather not have the sword. It's no big deal." The message that Chu Yang sent out a year ago was very faint, but very resolute. "As long as you say no, I'll give it up immediately. Even if it's an ancient treasure, I'll give it up if I say so. As if I'm abandoning my worn-out shoes." The sword tip and the sword tip both shouted angrily, as if they were angrily shouting, urging, and criticizing the sword's blade. Finally, the sword's blade was completely unfolded, gently sticking to Chu Yang's hand, and curling up in a fawning manner. Chapter 321. The blade of the sword touched him again, and then retracted. Her movements were extremely gentle, and she was excessively cautious. It was as if a naughty child had just received a huge shock and couldn't recover for a while. Chu Yang finally smiled. Seeing him smile, the sword blade finally heaved a sigh of relief and went back. The three broken sword parts merged into one and let out a joyful sword hum. Then, the entire sword was enveloped in a layer of soft white light, as if there was a layer of mercury flowing slowly on the sword. Then, the entire sword was completely covered, emitting a faint pink bloodlight, which disappeared in a flash. The sword blade became silent. It was only at this moment that Chu Yang could clearly feel that the three fragments of the calamity sword had finally merged completely, and their submission to him was also complete and thorough. If they were used by him, they had to be obedient. If they weren't, he would throw them away no matter how powerful they were. This was Chu Yang's principle. It was very domineering. Fortunately, he did it. In the space of consciousness, the sword spirit smiled softly. He couldn't help but think happily, "Do you think I'm still one of those sword masters who followed your every request?" However, this person was completely different from the one he had seen before. Thinking of this, he calmed himself down and turned into his human form in Chu Yang's space of consciousness. Wearing a green robe and holding a sword, he slowly practiced the 4 sword moves of the third part of the sword blade. One blade across the sky for 10,000 autumns, this road leads to the netherworld. Cut off the passers-by in the mortal world, where the blade is, everything end. Chu Yang closed his eyes and immersed himself in the space of consciousness. He didn't miss anything as he watched the sword spirit dance. At the same time, he thought deeply about the concept of these 4 sword moves. The moment the blade of the calamity sword completely returned to its original position, a colorless and odorless pure energy silently rushed out from the center of the lake. Its momentum was like thunder, and without anyone noticing, it directly rushed into the air. It was like a wild dragon that overturned the seas and rivers, wreaking havoc in the cloud. A huge aura spread out in all directions. The clouds in the sky were swept away in a breath's time. The blue sky was clear and there wasn't a single cloud in sight. The bright moon had just set in the west and the sky was full of stars, as if they were close at hand. However, in this extremely clear night sky, wind and thunder suddenly rumbled. Purple lightning whistled in the sky, incomparably swift and fierce. This was truly a spectacle that was rarely seen in 10,000 years. Too many people walked out of their rooms upon hearing the sound. They looked up at the night sky and clicked their tongues in wonder. At the Prime Minister's manor. Diwu Qingru was the first to discover this strange phenomenon. He had been calmly drinking tea at his desk, reading a book, and waiting for Yin Wutian's report. But the clouds had suddenly disappeared. And Diwu Qingru's face had been shaken for a split second. Then, he had silently arrived in the courtyard. It was as if he had always been in this place in the courtyard and had never moved. If someone familiar with Diwu Qingru were to see this scene, their jaws would drop to the ground in shock. Thinking about it, didn't he not know martial arts? How could there be such a high level of cultivation now? However, no one in the world would dare to be presumptuous in front of Diwu Qingru if they saw his current expression. Diwu Qingru was currently looking up at the starry sky. His entire face was distorted and trembling. His mouth was half open, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. His hands were tightly clenched into fists. The muscles of his body seemed to have congealed into stone. Diwu Qingru hadn't breathed for half an hour. How can this be? How can this be? Diwu Qingru finally let out a long breath. His eyes were somewhat powerless and frustrated as he looked at the starry sky. The Emperor star is hidden, and its position is shifted back and forth. This is the image of the stars shifting. There is thunder in the clear sky, but there are no clouds. This is the omen of the reversal of heaven and earth. There is lightning in the starry night, and the bright moon shines. This is the beginning of the chaos of heaven and earth. The starry sky is washed, and the starlight is dyed red. This is the great calamity of blood in the blue dome of heaven. Diwu Qingru's eyes were somewhat pained. Could it be that the appearance of the third fragment of the calamity sword will lead to a change in the law of evolution of the heavenly law? If so, then what is the point of my decades of planning? His voice was very low. It carried a strong unwillingness and a trace of hysterical madness. However, his expression had calmed down. However, his eyes were full of fighting spirit. They were filled with a bloody murderous aura. So what? The corners of Diwu Qingru's mouth held a trace of a sneer. He clasped his hands behind his back and looked at the deep starry sky. He sneered. How can the general trend be changed just because you say so? The general trend has been set. Even the heavens can't change it. I, Diwu Qingru, swear that I will use my wisdom to deal with it to the end. I would rather be punished by the heavens than fail at the last step. My life is in my hands. What can the heavens do? Then, he stood in the courtyard for a long time. His face became calmer and calmer. His eyes became more and more resolute, and persistent. I will never give up. His hands behind his back gently clenched into fists. He muttered to himself in his heart. Then, he turned around and walked back to his room. His footsteps were still relaxed. There wasn't a trace of panic in them. When the strange phenomenon appeared in the sky, Tai Biu Tian and Wu Qian were discussing matters in the camp. The entire Iron Cloud Citadel had been cleaned up. With the list of Diwu Qingru's original team provided by Chu Yang, it wasn't difficult at all to search for the flags. In a very short period of time, these spies were cleared out. Some of those who were on the run were also caught and brought to justice. If it weren't for the fact that they had to deal with the officials of Iron Cloud and the obstructions of some people who didn't understand the situation, this time would have been a third faster. Tai Biu Tian's butcher's knife was finally aimed at the military after all the spies of Iron Cloud had been caught and cleaned out. However, the military was in a delicate situation. Great Zhao's army was pressing down on the border. Tai Longcheng was guarding the front line. He didn't dare to move. Tai Longcheng didn't dare to leave the front line to attend the funeral of Tai Shicheng. This wasn't disloyalty or unfilial behavior. It was just that if Tai Longcheng wasn't there to strategize on the border, they wouldn't have a chance to fight against Great Zhao's army. It was as if Tai Longcheng was walking on a tightrope on a high cliff. He was extremely careful. He was using every ounce of his strength to fight a battle of wits and courage with Great Zhao's army. He didn't dare to relax even a little bit. If any of the spies mentioned in the intelligence report were to be moved, it could cause serious problems. Moreover, some of them were very important to Tai Longcheng. Tai Longcheng would have been suspicious if someone else had come. The consequences would have been unthinkable if he had alerted the enemy. Therefore, Tai Bu-tien had no choice but to personally lead the troops into battle. As long as he came to the army, the combination of imperial power and military power would have been the greatest strength. Before the departure, Tai Bu-tien had followed Chu Yongxin's instructions. He had recruited as many new soldiers as he could. He had done his best to mobilize the soldiers from all directions to the front line in waves. Tai Bu-tien had a feeling of urgency. He had a clear premonition in his heart: the decisive battle is about to begin. Perhaps, this newly appointed emperor's destiny will be fixed for eternity during this period of time. Perhaps, he will achieve great feats for 1,000 years. Tai Bu-tien's heart sank. Along the way, he had been thinking about what to say to Tai Longcheng. First, he had to convince Tai Longcheng. Then, he would have to take down all of those people without alerting the soldiers. Basically, there was no wind or waves. He had been thinking about this problem for a long time. In the other carriage, King of Helchu, Neo Chantian was also thinking about something. She felt that she had not seen Chu Yang for a long time. During this period of time, she had even dreamt of meeting him several times. But every time she woke up, her tears would wet her pillow. She was only worried about whether Chu Yang was doing well. Was he okay? She didn't think about the things that Tai Bu-tien was thinking about. Because Tai Bu-tien had come personally, she only needed to make arrangements. She didn't need to worry about these matters for the time being. Another vexing matter was that Tai Bu-tien was accompanied by a lot of experts on this trip. The experts of Beyond the Heavens sect had formed a small team. They were also acting as friendly guards. But there was one person that Wu Chantian was worried about. It was Second Marshal Uncle Li Jinsong. Wu Chantian even blamed her father, Wu Yunliang. You knew that he wasn't a good person. Why did you bring him along? Even if you wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to eliminate him, you shouldn't have chosen this time. Isn't this causing trouble? Wu Chantian's heart was in a mess. Chu Yang didn't speak a single word along the way. This made the surrounding imperial bodyguards feel even more creeped out by the gloomy aura around him. So, each of them braced themselves as they cautiously spoke. They were afraid that they would provoke the notorious king of Helchu. The emperor was going on an inspection tour. Naturally, the momentum was not small. Tai Bu-tien had already ordered for everything to be simple. But now was a critical time. The emperor was going to the front line. There was still a risk. Therefore, the Imperial Guards, and the garrison army were a big troop of 50,000 people. This didn't include the experts of Bu-tien Pavilion and the other big sects. In the dead of night, Tai Bu-tien's heart was in a mess. Coincidentally, Neo Chantian was also very worried. The two of them walked out of the tent at the same time. They breathed in the cold wind and found each other there. Miss him? Tai Bu-tien smiled mischievously. He was worried. But when he saw that someone was as worried as he was, and that he was secretly doing it, his mood was inexplicably comfortable. What's the use of missing him? Wu Chantian's mood was very low. But she didn't hide it. Tai Bu-tien had been looking for her more and more often. Sometimes, he wouldn't leave. This made Wu Chantian's heart tremble. She used this as a pretext to make things clear. There's someone deeply rooted in his heart. Neo Chantian said sadly, I can clearly feel this. With that person's existence, there's no room for anyone else in his heart. But, who's in his heart? Tai Bu-tien was a little worried. He stood with his hands behind his back. He pondered over Wu Chantian's words. He couldn't help but sigh deeply in his heart. Neo Chantian wasn't the only one with this feeling. Tai Bu-tien also felt it very clearly. When Chu Yang was alone, he longed for companionship. The deep longing and loneliness in his eyes all proved this. Chapter 322. People who were familiar with Chu Yang knew that Chu Yang's life wasn't complicated. In fact, it was extremely simple. If Chu Yang had someone he liked, it would definitely be in Beyond the Heavens sect. In fact, Wu Qianqian had checked every single person Chu Yang came into contact with after he was 10 years old. However, the results made Wu Qianqian even more confused. Such a person doesn't exist at all. It was impossible to have such deep feelings at the age of 8, right? That wouldn't be the truth. It would become a joke. Such a person had never appeared in the world. However, Chu Yang's expression clearly showed that he indeed had a sweetheart whom he would never change his mind about until death. This was strange. Tai Bu Tian was obviously thinking about this problem. She thought for a while. Then, her expression suddenly became strange. She smiled and said, "Do you think he likes what?" Wu Qianqian turned her head. "Men." Tai Bu Tian raised his eyebrows and smiled. "You're the one who likes men." Wu Qianqian's reaction was very intense. She didn't even think before rebutting the emperor of a country. However, Tai Bu Tian wasn't angry at all. Instead, she laughed until her shoulders shook. Wu Qianqian was even more worried. "I scolded him like this, but he didn't get angry at all. It seems that he really likes me. What should I do? What should I do?" In that instant, Wu Qianqian was so worried that she could hardly breathe. At this moment, the two of them felt their eyes brighten. It was late at night. How could their eyes brighten? The two of them looked up at the same time. With just one look, one could see a miraculous sight. Lightning flashed and thunder roared in the sky. However, it was strange that there were no clouds in the sky for thousands of miles. The stars in the sky seemed to be trembling. Moreover, it seemed that the universe had changed. Tai Butian stared at the sky in a daze for a very, very long time. Even when the sky returned to normal, she remained motionless. After a very, very long time, she finally lowered her head. An extremely sharp glint flashed across her eyes as she murmured, Wu Qianqian didn't understand. She was about to ask, but Tai Bu Tian had already turned around and returned to the tent. Then, an order was issued. "Set out immediately. We must travel day and night. We must reach Tai Longcheng's commander's tent in the shortest time possible. Military orders must be obeyed." These people were the best of the best. With a single order, they immediately set off. Iron hooves rumbled as they headed towards the southern border. Along the way, Tai Butian's expression was very strange. There is exhilaration, fear, joy during this period of time. All the great clans had joined hands to encircle and annihilate them. It could be said that they had reaped a bountiful harvest. With the birth of the Calamity Sword, the seal here loosened. The number of spirit beasts was increasing. However, their grades weren't very high. The strength of the 3 stars divine clan that occasionally appeared wasn't as strong as the legends said. Therefore, the various aristocratic families were somewhat surprised. In the end, this defensive battle had simply become a place to crazily snatch the spoils of war. After all, the fur, bones, and cores of spirit beasts were all things that the great clans of the 3 heavens urgently needed. With these things, the younger generation of the clan would grow faster and faster. He couldn't possibly rely entirely on the purple crystals, right? Purple crystals were treasures that could only appear in the upper 3 heavens. The various clans had gone through untold hardships to obtain elixirs, strange stones, and other things from the upper 3 heavens. Then, they had sent their experts to the upper 3 heavens to exchange or purchase these things. Every piece of purple crystal was very valuable. Now, if they had a large number of cores of spirit beasts, they wouldn't have to accept that layer of recording. Moreover, the strength of the younger generation of the clan could also develop by relying on the spiritual power of the cores. So, why not? Therefore, in the end, they basically crazily fought and slaughtered the spirit beasts to obtain resources. In fact, the various great clans had fought side by side against the enemy in the beginning. Then, they schemed against each other and fought against each other. Hundreds of conflicts had broken out between them. Many of the experts of the clans didn't die in the mouth of the spirit beasts. Instead, they died under the attacks of their companions. It had to be said that these were 3 kinds of tragedies. Just as the spirit beasts had been driven into the depths of the Kanglan battlefront, and the situation between the various great clans had become more and more uncontrollable, the situation suddenly changed overnight. Along with the strange phenomenon of heaven and earth, the sealed area of the Kanglan battlefront suddenly erupted with a strong light. Then, more than one place erupted with strong light. It made people inexplicably surprised. After the strong light disappeared, the people of the various great clans suddenly felt that the enemies they had encountered were becoming more and more difficult to deal with. Moreover, the experts of the 3 Stars Divine clan had appeared once again. They were obviously more powerful than the previous ones. The people of the various great clans hadn't had enough time to adjust their mentality when the spirit beasts had already begun their counterattack. The Kanglan battlefront was a desolate and uninhabited place where spirit beasts lived. So, how could it be occupied by humans? Although only one side had fallen at the moment, less than 1/10 of it had fallen. However, the turmoil it had caused was enormous. Along with the counterattack of the spirit beasts, the strength of the experts of the 3 Stars Divine clan had become more and more tyrannical. They had been suppressed for a while, and their casualties had increased greatly. There was almost no need for people to organize. The various great clans had once again formed an alliance. Although there were still some conflicts between the alliances, they weren't as chaotic as before. Moreover, the quality of the spirit beast's cause had increased along with the increase in the quality of the spirit beast's cause. The quality of the cause had also risen along with the tide. Therefore, everyone had once again sunk into a chaotic battle with each other. However, there were also a few clans that were very strange. For example, the Jiyu clan, the Ji clan, the Luo clan, the Dawn clan, and so on. Of course, the Mo clan was even stranger. Sometimes, the Mo clan would have friction with the other clans, and sometimes they would fight. Sometimes, they would be very close to each other. Everyone was taken aback by this. One or several spirit beasts had been surrounded by the people of the Jiyu clan. And, the Luo clan was on one side. Moreover, these spirit beasts were very rare. The Jiyu clan and the Luo clan had never been on good terms. Everyone was guessing that the Luo clan would make a move to snatch the spirit beasts. The people of the Luo clan would disappear after the people of the Jiyu clan had completely killed the spirit beasts and obtained the spoils of war. In fact, the Luo clan would immediately join hands with the Jiyu clan if any other clan wanted to loot a burning house. Let the invaders suffer a great loss with their heads and faces covered in dirt. If the people of the Ji clan and the Dawn clan had discovered the spirit beasts at the same time, there was no need for negotiation. One clan would have taken the initiative to withdraw. In fact, if the spirit beasts were tyrannical, one clan would have helped them for free. This kind of phenomenon was very rare in the Kanglan battlefront. As for the Mo clan, it was somewhat difficult to say. Mo Tianyun led one team, and Mo Tianji led another team. The people who followed Mo Tianyun were very unlucky. They would often find something, and it would be robbed. They would painstakingly kill one, and there would certainly be others waiting to take advantage of them. Once, Mo Tianyun finally discovered that the people of the Luo clan were killing a spirit beast. He gave an order to go and rob it. However, the Jiyu clan and the Dawn clan soon followed and swarmed them. The Luo clan also immediately counterattacked, and suffered a big loss. Mo Tianyun gnashed his teeth in hatred. These guys had always been at odds with each other. There had been a lot of friction between these people in the upper 3 heavens in the past. How could they collude with each other after going to the lower 3 heavens? Moreover, I heard that these people had gone to visit Little Sister. This shows that the Mo clan didn't have any evil intentions. So, why are they treating me like this? What is going on here? Could it be that Mo Tianji took advantage of the situation in the lower 3 heavens to win over these people? Tianji shouldn't have such a side right now, right? However, Mo Tianyun had no choice but to bite the bullet and swallow this grievance in the upper 3 heavens in the Kanglan battlefront. The chaos in the lower 3 heavens was secondary. The upper 3 heavens bore the brunt of this chaos. Moreover, the upper 3 heavens didn't have a buffer point like the Kanglan battlefront. This time, even the big clans that ruled the heavens started to move. Others might not be aware of the danger, but they knew very well what this heaven and earth anomaly represented. The third fragment of the Calamity Sword had appeared. Moreover, the commotion this time was very different from usual. This caused the big clans to be on high alert. What they were worried about was not the 3 Stars Divine clan or the Spirit Beast's rampage. They were worried about the Calamity Sword. According to the records, the Calamity Sword had appeared in the past few years. The time between the appearance of the Calamity Sword was at least 30 years. But this time, it had become once every half a year. This was too abnormal. Last summer, the first fragment of the Calamity Sword appeared and caused a storm. In the winter, the second fragment appeared and caused a storm. At that time, the big clans didn't think it was a big deal. After all, there was still a buffer of 20 to 30 years. Anything could happen in 20 to 30 years. The master of the Calamity Sword wanted to purge the heavens. This was a fact. To purge the heavens, he wanted to start with the big clans. This was also a fact. In the past, many big clans were on good terms with the master of the Calamity Sword. It wasn't that the big clans couldn't be kept. So they weren't in a hurry. However, the appearance of the third fragment caused everyone to panic. Heaven and earth were turned upside down, heaven and earth were turned upside down, the stars were in disorder, and the sky was dyed red with blood. All of this showed that the master of the Calamity Sword was a real disaster. As long as he was allowed to grow, the Great World Dragon would definitely be doomed. Now, in a mere year, the master of the Calamity Sword had obtained 3 fragments of the Calamity Sword. This sword master's growth speed was simply unimaginable. If he continued at this speed, wouldn't he be able to obtain the entire Calamity Sword in 3 years and rule the heavens? So the big clans immediately reacted. It wasn't just them. The upper 3 heavens was extremely vast. Other than the big clans, there were countless small clans. There weren't many fools in these clans, but there were quite a few smart ones. Everyone could see that this time, the heavens and earth would be turned upside down. Could their clans take advantage of this opportunity to leap over the dragon's gate? So everyone's heart was alive. This was an opportunity that only came once in 10,000 years. Chapter 323. Meng Chao Ran, Tan Tan, and Xie Danfeng arrived at the Kanglan battlefront at this time. This journey hadn't been easy. Meng Chao Ran had always had Tan Tan and Xie Danfeng by his side. But, he had thought of committing suicide several times despite his superb willpower. Xie Danfeng didn't know why, but she was very familiar with the Kanglan battlefront. At least, she was very familiar with the periphery. She had no problem acting as a guide along the way. However, this little girl didn't know what she was thinking. She didn't seem to be going to crowded places along the way. They could still bump into a few people at the beginning. But, they were surrounded by wind and sand later on. Meng Chao Ran was very experienced with this kind of change. So, he naturally understood a little. This Miss Xie didn't have a big conflict with her family. She was just acting spoiled and unreasonable because of her temper. She would have gone back by herself after 2 or 3 days. But, she bumped into Tan Tan when she came out. Miss Xie Danfeng was at her wits' end when she met this freak. At first, they were just fooling around. But, the two of them fought side by side. Then, Tan Tan was an extremely righteous man. In Tan Tan's heart, it's okay to fight with a girl and refuse to admit defeat. But, Tan Tan would yell at a dangerous moment when his life was in danger, "Woman, don't make trouble. Get lost." Tan Tan naturally thought, women should hide in the back if men don't die when encountering danger. Tan Tan's way of doing things was undoubtedly rude. It was also very impolite. But, Miss Xie Danfeng, who was like a female T-Rex, liked this kind of thing. Miss Xie Danfeng had always been intrepid since she was a child. Every little boy of her age had been beaten black and blue by her, and had been thrown off their feet. She had always been a big sister since she was a child. No one had ever treated her like a girl. Even her parents could only lament, just think of it as raising 2 children. Therefore, Xie Danfeng grew up in such a vigorous manner. But, it was undeniable that girls needed to be protected and taken care of. No matter how valiant a woman was, she still needed warmth. However, Miss Xie had never enjoyed this kind of gentle care that other girls could easily have for their entire lives. Although this was also her fault, after all, no one wanted to be treated with such gentleness and care for a girl, only to be met with a weird cackle and then a series of punches and kicks. But as she grew older, Miss Xie sometimes envied other girls. But at this time, her personality had already taken shape, and her image in other people's minds had also taken shape. For example, Xie Danfeng and a boy of the same age were injured together. If someone came forward to comfort them, they would only comfort that boy. If someone wanted to comfort Xie Danfeng, they would definitely be stopped by someone next to her. "Wow, what are you doing?" That was Xie Danfeng. Therefore, this person also left. No one knew that Xie Danfeng needed someone to comfort her at this time. However, they had suddenly encountered a freak like Tan Tan at this time. He couldn't help but feel that it was a rare commodity worth hoarding. Tan Tan liked her. And Xie Danfeng could see this. However, Tan Tan would never wrong himself for the sake of satisfying himself. It was even more impossible for her to cater to his liking. But Xie Danfeng didn't take it to heart. After all, a girl needed this feeling of being pursued. An ordinary girl would be a mother by the time she reached the age of 17. Then, she would be engaged. But no one dared to ask about Xie Danfeng until now. It wasn't that she wasn't beautiful, but that no one dared to. Basically, the legs of youngsters of the right age would go soft when they heard Xie Danfeng's name. It was said that there was once a duke of an aristocratic family. His parents said that they wanted to go to the Xie clan to propose marriage. But this duke pinched a rope and tied it to the beam of the house. He tied 2 knots, and then solemnly requested, "Any other girl of the Xie clan is fine, and any other girl of the aristocratic family is fine as well. It doesn't matter even if she is a little ugly. But, if it's Xie Danfeng, your son will hang himself here today." This clearly showed how famous Xie Danfeng was. But now, Xie Danfeng was enjoying Tan Tan's pursuit. This made her feel a little satisfied and complacent. She couldn't help but want to enjoy it for a while. This guy didn't know how to pursue a girl, and he was a little ugly. But even a mosquito's leg was meat. No matter what, this great-aunt had someone pursuing her, right? Xie Danfeng had gambled with Tan Tan along the way. So, she had already emptied her purse. But Tan Tan's clothes were bulging, and he was arrogant. Of course, Xie Danfeng wasn't convinced. So, she wanted to win it back. Later, the fighting strength of the spirit beasts increased. So, Tan Tan fought bravely without any regard for his own safety. He wouldn't let her fight. Even Meng Chao Ran was somewhat scared after struggling on the verge of death dozens of times. So, how could Xie Danfeng's heart not be moved? Therefore, Big Miss Xie was thinking in her heart, "This guy doesn't know how to flirt. But I don't need a man to know how to flirt with my temper." He was a little ugly, but his shocked expression was still somewhat interesting. Well, he was at least an elegant and beautiful youth when he was shocked. Therefore, Xie Danfeng's heart was somewhat active. Sometimes, she could even blush. Her brother Xie Danqiong would have been stunned if he had seen this phenomenon. However, Xie Danfeng had also learned that Tan Tan and Meng Chao Ran didn't belong to any clan. They were just 2 loose people. How could the clan agree to such people? To put it bluntly, the clan wouldn't agree to let Xie Danfeng marry Tan Tan even if she couldn't get married to a pig or a dog of a big clan. Big Miss Xie was well aware of this point. Therefore, she consciously led the 2 of them further and further away. And they went more and more remote. They couldn't meet the people of the Xie clan no matter what. Meng Chao Ran was very clear about this girl's thoughts. Therefore, he didn't say anything. After all, he had come here to gain experience. So, wasn't he going there to gain experience? If he could find a wife for his disciple without delaying his experience, then it would be a wonderful thing for both parties. Therefore, Meng Chao Ran neither agreed nor disagreed. These 2 people were about to start the latest competition, and the bet was the core of a 4th-grade spirit beast that Xie Danfeng had just obtained. However, the situation was still one-sided. Tan Tan's progress had increased by leaps and bounds during this time. Xie Danfeng had fallen into a disadvantageous position in terms of physical strength, sword, and spiritual power. Xie Danfeng was thrown to the ground by Tan Tan after fighting for less than a quarter of an hour. Then, he grabbed her arms and rode on her back. He then shouted in high spirits, "Do you admit defeat? Do you admit defeat?" Xie Danfeng didn't know why, but her entire body suddenly went soft when he sat on her this time. She propped up her upper body to resist, and fell to the ground with a puff sound. Her entire body went soft as she shouted, "Let me go first." Tan Tan didn't notice the change in this girl's tone. He was still panting like a fiend. He raised his eyebrows and glared at her. "Speak. Do you admit defeat? Let me go first." Xie Danfeng was somewhat anxious. Her body was getting softer and softer as she was being ridden. Moreover, it seemed as if a spring tide had emerged in her heart. And, her lower abdomen didn't seem to have any offspring. "No." Tan Tan angrily said, "Do you want to act shamelessly? You have to make it clear that you've lost this time's inner core, right?" Xie Danfeng struggled. She felt the strong friction, and that strong masculine aura. God knows why she was so sensitive today. Xie Danfeng's eyes were almost hazy. She moaned and said, "You said that you're regretting it, so it's yours. You bad guy. Quickly let me go." Her voice even sounded a little coquettish. Xie Danfeng herself couldn't have imagined such a voice coming out. "Is this what I'm saying?" It's so corny. However, Tan Tan didn't hear anything. He was still like a man with a heart of steel. "No. You have to admit defeat first. You don't want to admit defeat and act shamelessly." Humph humph. He raised his eyebrows. Then, he freed his hand, and slapped her round buttocks twice. Her buttocks rippled as he smacked them. Then, he proudly said, "Don't think that I won't dare to hit you." Humph. He gently slapped her again as he spoke. He wanted to prove that he dared to hit her. In fact, he was very daring. Cough cough. It's well known that a girl's body is more sensitive sometimes. Cough cough. Miss Xie Danfeng is also a tribulation this time. She has encountered that sensitive time. And, she has met this devil star, Tan Tan. The reaction was even more intense after these two slaps. Xie Danfeng suddenly had a wonderful feeling. It seemed as if something mysterious was gushing out of her body in an unstoppable manner. Her body trembled violently. Then, it trembled violently a few times. Then, it trembled violently again. Her entire body suddenly lost its strength. She weakly lay on the ground for a while. She was ashamed, angry, and ashamed. So, she started to cry. Tan Tan panicked. He hastily let go of her hand, and got down from her body. Then, he rubbed his hands together, and said, You, why are you crying? You, don't cry, you, oh. Xie Danfeng felt even more ashamed. So, she simply lay on the ground, and burst into tears. What's going on? What's going on? Tan Tan was at a loss. He didn't know what was going on with this miss. Isn't it always like this? We had a fight 2 days ago. So, why is it like this today? Xie Danfeng continued to cry when she saw that this rash man didn't come forward to comfort her. Finally, Tan Tan slowly walked forward, and stooped down. Xie Danfeng felt a little comforted in her heart. This bastard has finally come over. Humph. However, she heard Tan Tan sniffing when he was about to help her up. Then, he twitched his nose, and shook his big head. He sniffed here and there. Then, he suspiciously scratched his scalp and said, "What's that smell? It's very strange." It's somewhat like. Xie Danfeng stared blankly for a moment. Then, she suddenly blushed. She was very ashamed. She didn't know where her strength came from. But, she fiercely jumped up when she saw that Tan Tan was sniffing here and there. Then, she ferociously kicked his belly. The strength of this kick was extremely great. Chapter 324. You crazy woman. What are you doing? Xie Danfeng covered her face and ran away. She turned around while sobbing. Tan Tan was dumbfounded again. He was about to chase after her when he heard Xie Danfeng shout in shame and anger, "Don't come over." I am changing my clothes. Tan Tan was startled. He was dumbfounded again. He thought, why are you changing your clothes at this time? Why are you changing your clothes all of a sudden? You clearly want to act shamelessly. He was about to chase after her when Meng Chao Ran caught up from behind. He patted his shoulder and stopped him. Then, he asked, what's wrong? Meng Chao Ran was also very puzzled. How did Tan Tan make her cry when he was about to succeed? Young Lady Xie's temper is such that it won't be easy for Tan Tan to make her cry. I don't know. Tan Tan scratched his head and made a whoosh-whoosh sound. His face was full of confusion and bewilderment. This woman suddenly cried. Meng Chao Ran rolled his eyes. He suddenly had an impulse to slap this guy to death. You made her cry, and you're telling me that you don't know? However, Tan Tan couldn't even explain the reason. So, Meng Chao Ran could only stare. Xie Danfeng came out from behind the big rock after a long while. She had changed into an aqua-green dress. Her walking posture was very strange. She was biting her lips, and her face was red. She didn't know what was going on, but she would get up again, and her face would become red again. She rolled her eyes and looked at Tan Tan. Then, she lowered her head. She looked a little shy like a little girl. Meng Chao Ran's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. I don't know about other things. But, I know that young Lady Xie's skin is super thick. She is basically invulnerable to attack a fortress. Now, this girl blushes at the slightest thing. She walks with small steps and speaks in a soft voice. Is she really that T-Rex from a moment ago? Why did you suddenly change your clothes? Tan Tan frowned and asked in a dissatisfied manner, what time is this? Why did you change your clothes? Xie Danfeng bit her lips. She snorted and turned her head. Tan Tan flew into a rage. He furiously said, what are you snorting about? Don't you know that you've already lost? Hand over the core now. Xie Danfeng felt a burst of internal injury. She had nothing to say to this guy who was extremely insensitive. She grabbed the inner core and threw it at him. She bit her lip and cursed, inner core, inner core. All you know is the core. Tan Tan received it. He beamed with delight, and put away the inner core. Then, he held his head high and stuck out his chest. He then waved his big hand, let's go, let's walk in front. Xie Danfeng bit her lips and stared at him. She was speechless with grief and indignation on her face. This guy doesn't even know to ask me why I'm crying. Then, she heard Tan Tan continue while she was thinking, moreover, I don't care what kind of mental illness you have. But, I won't bicker with you. But, you're not allowed to cry in the future. Do you understand? Xie Danfeng continued to stare. She felt as if her mind had gone blank. You women's crying, throwing a tantrum, and threatening to hang themselves are useless against me, Tan Tan proudly announced, therefore, you don't need to worry about this aspect. I will still collect the land that should be collected. Xie Danfeng stared blankly for a while. Then, she walked forward with heavy steps without uttering a word. She also understood that she would be dreaming if she expected him to be gentle and considerate when she was with such a guy. Moreover, it would be nothing more than a daydream. This guy had a strong and invincible ability to destroy moods and atmospheres. He was definitely the #1 expert in the world. Xie Danfeng puffed up her cheeks. She looked at the ground with irreconcilable eyes. Then, she lowered her head and rushed forward. Tan Tan followed closely beside her. It seemed that he wasn't used to not quarreling for so long. So, he coughed twice and said, you haven't said anything yet. Why did you change your clothes? I like it. Why do you care? What's wrong? Xie Danfeng suddenly stopped. She put her hands on her hips, and her eyes spouted fire. Then, she raised her head and stuck out her chest, and shouted loudly. Her voice was like a thunderclap. Tan Tan was startled. He looked at the grave and stern face of his sweetheart. Then, he muttered, if you don't want to say it, then don't say it. His voice was very low. Xie Danfeng fiercely roared. She didn't feel very depressed in her heart anymore. Then, she saw that Tan Tan was somewhat scared. So, she snorted twice, turned around, and walked away. Tan Tan continued to follow her. He had a question in his heart, but he didn't dare to ask it. However, he couldn't hold it in any longer. So, he ran a few steps to catch up with Xie Danfeng. Then, he sneakily whispered, "This, that, what? If you have something to say, then say it." Xie Danfeng's beautiful face was extremely grave and stern. She had already regained her previous valiant appearance. "What was that smell I smelled at that time?" Tan Tan's words had successfully pulled her out of her valiant character. She suddenly became unrestrained. She looked at Tan Tan as if she wanted to eat him alive. "What did you say?" Xie Danfeng clenched her teeth and asked word by word. Her body approached him dangerously as she asked this question. An ominous glint flickered in her eyes. I said that it wasn't as good as. Tan Tan tried his best to lean back to avoid the other party's oppression. His voice was flustered. "It wasn't what? What wasn't it?" Xie Danfeng roared like a thunderbolt. She then turned around to leave. The best way to deal with this topic was to not talk about it. However, it was too late. Tan Tan thought that she was asking him a question. So, he didn't dare to say it. Instead, he asked, "Did you pee?" Xie Danfeng's delicate body was exposed to the sunlight. She slowly turned her head with her face flushed red. "I said, did you pee in your pants?" Tan Tan was somewhat flustered. He took a step back. However, he still spoke in the spirit of seeking truth. "I smelled something in your pants at that time, and you went to change." He tilted his head after he finished speaking. Then, he pondered and said with uncertainty, "But, it wasn't very smelly, it didn't seem like pee, that smell was somewhat strange. Let me think. Xie Danfeng held her head with both hands. She screamed at the top of her lungs, "Tan Tan, I'll kill you. I'll definitely kill you. You'll be killed by 1,000 blades. You're a stinky hooligan who makes people's hair stand on end. You're a big bastard without any sense of shame. Ah. Then, her eyes turned red. Her face turned red. Even her neck and ears turned red. She clenched her fists and rushed towards Tan Tan like a madwoman. Her martial strength had suddenly increased by several times. She grabbed Tan Tan and started to beat him like a sandbag. She then kicked him over and over again. Tan Tan screamed repeatedly. He stumbled, rolled, and rolled. He didn't have the strength to fight back. He suddenly recalled Chu Yang's teachings: "You can't guard against the enemy you're facing. You're no match for them. Moreover, you can't escape. So, you only need to do one thing. Cover your head, and hug your balls. Do whatever you want. You'll be fine as long as these two parts are fine." Tan Tan suddenly had a flash of inspiration. He gave up all resistance. His body shrank into a ball. Then, he fiercely stuck his head down and covered his crotch with both hands. "Hit me. A dead pig isn't afraid of boiling water." This violent behavior lasted for a quarter of an hour. Xie Danfeng was gasping for breath. She kicked Tan Tan, and he rolled on the ground like a rubber ball. He rolled for a long distance, and rolled up a steep slope. Then, he rushed halfway up the slope. Then, his momentum stopped. Then, he exerted his strength in the opposite direction, and rolled back. Xie Danfeng couldn't help but chuckle when she saw this scene. "This bastard. I don't know whether to laugh or cry." Meng Chao rushed over afterwards. He was confused. He opened his eyes wide, and asked, What's wrong? What's wrong?" Xie Danfeng angrily said, "Ask your good disciple." She turned around, and dashed away without looking back. Tan Tan called out, "Master Feng, save me." When Meng Chao finally understood the whole story, he almost beat Tan Tan up again. "Even if you really don't know how to speak, you can't be this stupid, right? This is such a good situation, but you still want to spoil the fun. How did this bastard come up with this?" Tan Tan groaned in grief. The matter finally came to an end. Miss Xie Danfeng was furious. She didn't know that she had deviated from the original direction, and had started to move towards the center of the Kanglan battlefront. She was sulking as she rushed forward. But, She had already bumped into people by the time she woke up. Coincidentally, it was the people of the Xie clan. This made Xie Dan Feng somewhat stunned. She couldn't help but stand at the corner and stare blankly. Meng Chao ran and Tan Tan turned around to take a look. They saw that there was a fierce fight about 1,000 feet away in front of them. On one side, there were several hundred people of the Xie clan. On the other side, there was a large group of Iron Lion spirit beasts. Among the Iron Lion spirit beasts, there were 5 people dressed in strange clothes. Meng Chao Rant's bosom made a crashing sound. The divine Kai gathering fish that he had been keeping for Tan Tan inexplicably turned over a few waves in the fish tank and started to blow bubbles. 3 stars divine clan? Meng Chao Ran and Tan Tan were stunned. These are the 3 stars divine clan? Xie Dan Feng saw that her brother and her clansmen weren't in danger for the time being. So, she felt relieved. She curiously looked at the 3 strangely dressed people in the fierce fight. She was somewhat surprised as she said, "Tan Tan, they are uglier than you." Tan Tan said in shock, "What about now?" Xie Dan Feng burst into laughter and said, "You're very handsome now." Tan Tan continued to be shocked. "Do you know those people?" Xie Dan Feng didn't despise his shock this time. Instead, she carefully looked at him for a while. Then, she nodded and said, "Well, they are much more pleasing to the eye. Let me tell you something. That handsome and confident man who is commanding the battle has the demeanor of a great general. He is my brother, Xie Dan Qiong." Tan Tan was really shocked this time. His facial features shifted in an instant. He breathed in cold air and said in surprise, "So, he is my eldest uncle." Xie Dan Feng was ashamed. She kicked him. "Get lost." There was a large group of people next to the fierce fight between the 2 clans. They were taking pleasure in the misfortune of the Xie clan and the Iron Lion spirit beasts. They were obviously waiting to take advantage of the situation. A large flag was erected high. There was a clear snow-white lotus on it. The word Luo was in the heart of the lotus. It was fluttering in the wind. 2 young men stood side by side under the flag. They looked valiant. They were Luo Ku Wu and Luo Ku Di. Chapter 325. Behave yourself. Keep calm. Xie Dan Qiong is not that easy to take advantage of. Luo Ku Wu snorted and looked at the battlefield cautiously. He didn't miss any part of the battle and carefully observed any clues that could lead to changes in the battle. "Didn't you see? Although the spirit beasts are powerful, Xie Dan is in charge of the battle formation. So, the Xie clan's losses aren't too big. So, it's going to be very difficult for us to take advantage of them. Don't be complacent. Watch carefully. Don't let Xie Dan Qiong bring the spirit beast bow over. If that happens, Xie Dan Qiong will take advantage of us." "Absolutely no problem." Luo Ku Di chuckled. "I'm an expert now, pay." Luo Ku Wu spat. He spat and turned his head away in disdain. Xie Dan Qiong was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. His little sister had gone missing. He had been killing spirit beasts while looking for her. So, he had unknowingly distanced himself from the other aristocratic clans. In fact, he had deviated from his original plan. However, he had run into 3 people from the 3 stars divine clan here. Xie Dan Qiong wouldn't have been afraid if it had only been these 3 people. However, these people had brought along a large number of Iron Lion beast. There were more than 100 Iron Lion beasts in this batch, and all of them were 5th grade lower grade spirit beast. Iron Lion beasts, as the name suggested, were a group of lions. However, these lions were different from ordinary ones. Each of them had copper skin and iron bones. Ordinary swords and sabers would break with a catcher sound. Furthermore, these Iron Lion beasts were extremely nimble, coming and going like the wind. They could attack with all 4 of their hooves, and their bite force was even more powerful. The hardest thing to guard against was the innate ability of the Iron Lion. The throat of this kind of Iron Lion was the most tightly wrapped part of its body. It was its inner core. However, it could fiercely spew out its inner core to injure the enemy if it was in a life or death situation. Moreover, it was very powerful. A 5th grade Iron Lion was enough to injure a 1st grade king level expert. Now, He had encountered over 100 of them. How unlucky was that? More importantly, if it was just these fellows, it would be fine. Under his command, even if he couldn't wipe them all out, he would still be able to gain the upper hand by paying a certain price. But at this time, the Luo brothers actually shamelessly flanked them from behind. They were obviously waiting for the Xie family to be exhausted and take advantage of the situation to claim the spoils of war. This almost drove Xie Danqiong crazy. He had tried to lure these spirit beasts to the Luo clan's side 3 or 4 times. However, the Luo brothers were extremely slippery. They had always avoided them in advance. Then, they would stand at a distance that would make him feel uneasy. Xie Danqiong was furious. Could it be that this time, no matter what, the Luo clan would be able to enjoy the fruits of their labor? Xie Danqiong was considering. This was not a matter of him compromising, but a matter of his family's reputation. Xie Danqiong didn't want to back down. When fighting for Sunlight Saber and Underworld Moon, he had already failed once. Whether it was real or not, he didn't get it. Xie Danqiong would never allow himself to be defeated this time. Therefore, Xie Danqiong calmed down his mind as fast as he could after a burst of anxiety. He no longer thought about the Luo brothers. Instead, he concentrated all his attention on the battle. His entire mind was suddenly pulled away from the entire battle. It was as if he was looking down from above, coldly watching and commanding this battle. Xie Danqiong has entered the Iceheart realm. Luo Ku Wu's eyes flashed with envy. Iceheart realm. Luo Ku Di was startled. Isn't this the same realm as the empty mirror realm that Big Brother Chu Yang taught us? This Xie Danqiong has entered it at this time? The two people's shock only lasted for a moment. Then, they started to gloat. Xie Danqiong was also shocked. Because, at the outermost periphery, he saw a figure rushing over with a whip in her hand. She shouted loudly, "Insignificant iron lion beast dares to be so arrogant. Your great-aunt is coming." Xie Danqiong was tongue-tied. His back was full of cold sweat. He sat down on the ground. His Iceheart realm was instantly shattered, and he almost suffered internal injuries from the backlash. "My great-aunt," Xie Danqiong wanted to cry but had no tears. "When I was looking for you, I couldn't find you. When you shouldn't have appeared, you appeared faster than anyone else. You're not my sister, you're my great-aunt." Then, he saw an even more shocking scene. He could clearly see that beside his sister's graceful figure, there was a person with a strange appearance that resembled that of a member of the 3 Stars Divine clan. This person was roaring strangely, and took large strides into the battle circle. He rushed towards the Iron Lion beasts, and roared in a voice that would be unforgettable for the rest of one's life. "Oh tilde, these lousy lions dare to besiege my brother-in-law. Come, come, come." Xie Danqiong was dumbstruck. He couldn't bear this powerful blow. He spat out a mouthful of blood. His finger trembled as he pointed at his sister and that monster. He was so angry that he couldn't speak properly. You. Wow, Xie Danqiong collapsed. "I've gone out for a few days, and I've brought back a brother-in-law. Moreover, he's such a different brother-in-law. Young lord." The expert bodyguards beside him hurriedly came over. Xie Danqiong had already stood up. He fiercely wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. His voice was cold. His eyes were cold. "Protect the young lady." "Yes." Xie Danqiong hadn't spoken these words clearly. But, everyone understood what he meant. He had only said protect the young lady. But, he hadn't said protect the others. In other words, we don't care about the life or death of that person who's with the young lady. Xie Danqiong's body floated, and he stood on the back of his horse. He waved the flag in his hand again and again. The Xie clan's battle formation also started to move faster. Xie Danfeng and Tan Tan rushed into the group of Iron Lion beasts like a whirlwind. They had been cooperating with each other for a long time. So, they were already familiar with each other. One of them would attack from afar, and the other would attack from close range. Their cooperation was seamless. "I've said this earlier, why are you girls running so close to each other? Isn't it good to be so far away?" Tan Tan didn't stop talking. He had already started to fight with an iron lion beast. Tan Tan's body was shaken into the air like a rubber ball with a few bang sounds. The people of the Xie clan suddenly surrounded Xie Danfeng to protect her. He's inside, and I'm outside. Why are you protecting me? Xie Danfeng became angry. Are you stupid? The experts of the Xie clan didn't utter a word. They just looked at her. Let me go. Xie Danfeng was mad with anger. Tan Tan was in a critical situation. She had rushed out without saying anything. And Tan Tan had followed her in purely for her sake. How would she explain herself if Tan Tan were to get hurt? Xie Danqiong. I won't let you off if Tan Tan gets hurt. Xie Danfeng became anxious when she saw that the surrounding people weren't getting out of the way. So, she shouted loudly. Xie Danqiong's face darkened. Have you ever seen your younger sister and elder brother call themselves I'm your mother? Xie Danqiong was helpless to have such a valiant younger sister. Luo Kudi was laughing from ear to ear. He was taking pleasure in other people's misfortune. But he was suddenly shocked. He opened his mouth wide. I didn't mishear, right? Tan Tan? Isn't he Big Brother Chu's junior brother? Luo Kudi's heart suddenly became warm as he thought of this. He didn't have time to think. He also didn't have time to greet his elder brother. Luo Kudi let out a long and loud shout. He unsheathed his long sword with a clang sound, and flashed in the air. Then, he and his sword transformed into a thunderbolt. They crossed a distance of 1,000 feet, and rushed over the heads of the people of the Xie clan. Awu, tilde, I'm coming. Duo Kudi's shadow disappeared. Second brother, Luo Ku wasn't able to hold him back. So, Luo Kudi had already rushed out. So, he couldn't help but curse in a flustered and exasperated manner. Luo Kudi, you bastard. I'll add 3 more levels to your yoke. But he didn't forget to give orders. He stomped his feet in a flustered and exasperated manner, and roared, What are you looking at? You haven't seen the second young master, and you've already rushed down. You bunch of stupid birds. I'll beat you down. The people of the Luo clan rushed down. Luo Kudi was already in the midst of the iron lion beasts. He landed on the right side of Tan Tan. He brandished his sword, and cut an iron lion beast into 2 with a shua sound. The sharpness of his sword made everyone's jaws drop. Luo Kudi tilted his head and blinked while fighting. Are you Tan Tan? Tan Tan issued a strange sound. Then, he pointed at his own nose. You've also heard of my handsome and elegant name. His strange voice sounded like a dragon's roar, a tiger's roar, and a wolf's howl. So, Luo Kudi didn't understand what he was saying. Instead, he quivered and shuddered. Then, he heard these words clearly. And, Luo Kudi staggered. That's right. He has such a unique voice. Moreover, he's still so narcissistic in such a fierce battle. It's very difficult to find another person like him in the entire heaven apart from Big Brother Chu's junior brother. Awu tilde, how about we fight together? Luo Kudi mischievously smiled. Walking together is fine. But, you're very ugly. I'm under a lot of pressure when I'm with you. Tan Tan wrinkled his brows. He seemed somewhat reluctant. Luo Kudi wanted to vomit blood. Awu tilde bullshit. I'm more handsome than you. People who feel inferior about their looks say this. Tan Tan squinted his eyes. He was very displeased. Why are you howling when you're talking? Why are you howling like a wolf? Luo Kudi shut his mouth. He didn't say a word. Luo Kudi was thoroughly defeated in their first meeting. He finally understood Chu Yang's words. If you see my junior brother Tan Tan, you'll definitely be subdued by him. Luo Kudi's cheeks streamed with tears as he thought of these words. Big brother, how is this subduing? It's like thunder rumbling in the sky. I'm completely subdued. Such a rare person is actually your junior brother. He's really my idol. Big brother, you were too modest when you said those words before. Xie Danqiong. Luo Kudi flew up with his sword. He roared in the sky, for the sake of my brother, how about our 2 clans cooperate to deal with these lion beasts first? Don't worry. We'll each take our own gains after this. We won't ask you for anything more. You're lucky today. Xiedan Qiong was surprised. But, how could he not agree to such a good thing that fell from the sky? He hurriedly replied, Luo Ku Di, do you mean what you say? Of course. Luo Ku Di arrogantly raised his head. Chapter 326. Just as she was weeping, the Drought clan suddenly let out a long howl. The remaining 80 or so Iron Lion beasts retreated like a tide. The 3 divine beings of the 3 Stars Divine clan solemnly glanced at this side. Their gazes were faintly fixed on Tan Tan's body. It seemed that they were sizing up Tan Tan's extraordinary appearance. Especially his eyebrows, one of which was piercing the sky, while the other was piercing the earth. The expression in their eyes was very strange. Especially when Tan Tan was talking about who, the 3 of them maintained an attitude of not taking it lightly. However, they were secretly listening to Tan Tan's voice. After a long time, Guiyi suddenly raised his hand and let out a sharp sound. Following the rumbling sound, the 3 of them, along with a large number of Iron Lion beasts, disappeared like a tide. Meng Chao Ran, who had been hiding on the side to protect them, clearly felt that those people's gazes were on Tan Tan's face. It seemed that in the face of so many experts, these people from the 3 Stars Divine clan only noticed Tan Tan, who was a martial great master. Why was this? Meng Chao Ran's eyebrows were tightly knitted. He pondered. Suddenly, he felt an indescribable sense of crisis from the bottom of his heart. He suddenly felt that something was about to happen. Therefore, Meng Chao Ran made a decision at this moment. He would immediately take Tan Tan and leave. Even if he had to pay some price, he would leave immediately. There was no room for delay. Choke! Why are you running away? Luo Ku Di opened his eyes wide. It was the first time that the great clans had encountered such a situation when fighting against the 3 Stars Divine clan and spirit beasts. Retreating without a fight. What was going on? This was not in line with their fierce style. Xiedan Feng, come here. Xiedan Qiong let out a sigh. Then, his anger surged up. What are you yelling for? Xiedan Feng was originally very guilty. However, after being yelled at by her brother, the disgust in her heart immediately rose. She did not show any weakness as she returned the yell. Is this your elder brother? Tan Tan crooked his eyebrows and squinted his eyes as he asked. Yes. Xiedan Feng snorted and nodded. I have to say. Tan Tan said in a low voice, your brother is actually more beautiful than you, Tan Tan. Xiedan Feng immediately grabbed the wrong person. The other person who grabbed the wrong person was Xiedan Qiong. Beautiful, these 2 words could only be used to describe a woman. If it was used to describe a man, then it would be a little, cough cough cough. Xiedan Qiong had always been proud and arrogant. He hated it the most when a talented person said that he looked like a woman. At this moment, when he heard Tan Tan's accusation, his eyes and hands almost turned blue in anger. Then, Xiedan Feng slowly walked over. She moved closer to Xiedan Qiong and pointed at Tan Tan from time to time. She meant that Tan Tan had protected her and had saved her along the way. Xiedan Feng didn't know what she was thinking. She had simply exaggerated Tan Tan's misgivings by 10 times. However, the more she spoke, the more conflicted Xiedan Qiong's face became. This brother. Xiedan Qiong cupped his hands towards Tan Tan and said in an amiable manner, may I know Ben's name? My surname is Tan, and my name is Tan. Tan Tan was upright and unafraid. But, he immediately thought that he should be shocked in order to leave a good impression on his future brother-in-law. Therefore, he immediately said in a shocked manner, it's the Tan of the epiphyllum. What do you think? Don't you think I'm just like an epiphyllum, possessing an unparalleled talent? Cough cough cough. Xiedan Qiong coughed awkwardly. He rubbed his temples, and was suddenly at a loss for words. He had prepared a bellyful of accusations. But, he heard this ugly melon in front of him call himself elegant and handsome like a epiphyllum. Suddenly, all the hairs on his body stood erect, and he forgot what he wanted to say. Luo Ku Di smiled crookedly on one side. So, it's Brother Tan. Xiedan Qiong rubbed his nose as if he had rhinitis. He then asked, Brother Tan, What is your origin?
My origin?
Tan Tan hastily smiled. He also knew that this guy was his brother-in-law. So, he didn't dare to neglect him. He hastily put on a face of sincerity and said with a shocked smile, I came from the lower three heavens. Xiedan Qiong scratched his head and felt a headache. He felt as if his head was about to split open. Xiedan Qiong had never done such a childish thing like scratching his head since he was 7 or 8 years old. But, his neat hair looked like a chicken's nest today. So, you came from the lower three heavens, humph. Xiedan Qiong immediately concluded, this guy isn't worthy of my younger sister's family background. Then, he saw the exaggerated look of shock on the other side's face. He didn't know whether to cry or cry. You should have talked to me properly. What are you so shocked about? You made me think that it was my own appearance that shocked you. Find a mirror and look at yourself. Isn't it just that I'm a little handsome? Xiedan Qiong looked a little embarrassed. But, he still said, Brother Tan, thank you for your chivalry and courage to save He Gui. My Xie clan will repay you generously for this favor. What he meant was, you shouldn't expect anything else. I will compensate you. Reward? Why would I want you to reward me generously? Tan Tan gritted his teeth and said, I saved Xiedan Feng because I like her. I want her to be my wife. Xiedan Qiong's complexion turned as black as the bottom of a pot. He tilted his head to look at his younger sister, who had always been intrepid. But, she actually lowered her head shyly. He couldn't help but be speechless. Brother LL, you must be joking. From Brother Tan to brother, the distance between them had widened a little. However, Xiedan Qiong's scheme was useless in front of Tan Tan. As for the difference between Brother Tan and brother, he simply couldn't tell. How could I be joking? Tan Tan glared and shouted, how could I be joking when this important matter of marriage is related to my happiness and my children? Xiedan Feng was embarrassed. She stamped her feet and said cautiously, who wants to have children with you? Don't be shameless. Humph. You. Tan Tan said as if it was a matter of course, you're my wife. Why don't you give me children? You bastard. Xiedan Feng looked at him angrily. She seemed to be very angry. Xiedan Qiong was dumbfounded. I haven't said anything yet. But, these two people have started to openly curse each other. And, they've started to talk about children in the blink of an eye. After a long time, he shouted dizzily, shut up. Xiedan Feng, you're getting more and more daring. Marriage, is it something that you can decide on your own? It's ridiculous for a young lady to say such a thing. What nonsense. Luo Huangdi shouted in a strange tone, you're just thinking that Brother Tan isn't good enough for your sister's family. You're just looking at people with narrow-minded eyes. Luo Kudi, this matter has nothing to do with your family. Xiedan Qiong shouted coldly. He suddenly felt a belly full of anger. How can it have nothing to do with you? Luo Kudi stepped forward bravely. Brother Tan, what about your Xie family? Could it still be considered as a failure of a noble family? You're actually looking down on this and that. Bah. You're saying that you don't care about marriage. You're enjoying your wife every day. Why do you have to be naked? Luo Kudi said disdainfully, you're just a slow-witted person who doesn't know that a starving person is hungry. It's easy for you to say these things. Your sister. Ha! Damn, he wanted to say, your sister's temper is good enough. You should be glad that you've seduced a woman. But when he was about to say it, he stopped. He was afraid that he would offend Tan Tan. Xiedan Lu fumed. He pointed his finger and shouted, Luo Kudi, if you want to die, I'll kill you. Xiedan Lu had been suppressing his anger for a long time, and he was almost hit when he was down. He was scared by his own sister, and he was scared and nervous. Finally, the anger that Xiedan Lu had suppressed for a long time exploded. Sob sob. Luo Kudi puffed out his chest and took a step forward. His two hands trembled frivolously as he issued a challenge. You're absolutely right. This young master will die from resting. I'm fucking dead from resting. Come Xiedan Qiong. Fuck the heavens, if I don't die from resting, you're a fucking rabbit. You. Rabbit master, These 3 things have aroused Xie Danqiong's murderous intent. Xie Danqiong roared. Suddenly, the surroundings turned cold. 2 snowflakes appeared at the same time. They added a dreamlike scene to this place where she had just passed by. Her murderous aura was condensed. Clang. Luo Kudi unsheathed his sword and shouted, "Cough." Tan Tan scratched his head on one side. He was very puzzled. It seems that they were talking about me. How did they end up fighting while talking? Although he didn't know why Luo Kudi would help him for no reason, and it seemed that he would support him to the end, Tan Tan still had a good impression of Luo Kudi. Stop! Stop! 2 shouts sounded at the same time. One was ruthless. The other was gentle. Luo Kuwu and Meng Chao Ran arrived at the same time. Xie Danqiong, I'll accompany you. Luo Kuwu snorted, I won't let others say that you, Xie Dan Lu, only know how to bully the weak and only know how to bully your sister. Xie Dan Lu gritted his teeth. He couldn't control himself no matter how good his self-restraint was. Wait. Meng Chao Ran took a step forward. He looked at Xie Danqiong with deep eyes. He clearly felt that this young man was extraordinary. He said, Xie Danqiong, right? You are. Xie Danqiong turned his attention to Meng Chao Ran. When he first saw Meng Chao Ran, Xie Danqiong felt that this person might not be very strong. However, he had never seen such an indifferent and elegant temperament in his life. He only saw his warm and peaceful smile, and felt that half of his ruthlessness had disappeared out of thin air. I'm Tan Tan's master. Meng Chao Ran indifferently said, I don't know if Xie Danqiong is interested in listening. I'll tell you. Xie Danqiong slowly controlled his temper. The 2 dreamlike viburnum flowers suddenly disappeared. Meng Chao Ran fixed his gaze on Xie Danqiong. His gaze was deep and indifferent for a long time. However, Xie Danqiong felt that his heart had slowly calmed down under Meng Chao Ran's gaze. He had calmed down and returned to his calm state. He could accept everything in his heart now. Marriage is a matter of equal social status. Meng Chao Ran clasped his hands behind his back. He indifferently said, this has been the case since ancient times. If you don't come from the right background, it's easy for a tragedy to happen. Chapter 327. But, paying too much attention to the social status of the families will create a tragedy. Meng Chao Ran spoke very slowly. But, every sentence was very clear. So, Xie Danqiong could hear it clearly, and feel a sense of approval. Yes. Xie Danqiong let out a long sigh. The marriage of the children of big clans is even more difficult. Well, it is as difficult as ascending to the heavens to find someone who is of equal social status to them. Therefore, ordinary people can't see the suffering of the children of big clans. They only see the glory of the younger generation of big clans. But, they don't think that these heavens' prides will have to pay for generations to continue this glory. Meng Chao Ran's voice was very heavy. It was also very frustrated. Xie Danqiong deeply sighed. Meng Chao Ran's words had spoken his heart. But, this also depends on the situation. If a clan has an outstanding heir, then, it doesn't need to sacrifice the happiness of its daughter. Meng Chao Ran faintly smiled, Elder Xie, you are confident and satisfied. Xie Danqiong's handsome eyebrows raised. These words made him feel very comfortable. But, they also had a hidden meaning. How could he not understand it? Not to mention, even if you judge a book by its cover, Elder Xie. Meng Chao Ran's eyes suddenly emitted an extremely sharp and cold light. He was brimming with confidence as he looked at Xie Danqiong. Every dog has its day. Don't bully a poor young man. His face had always been kind. But, it had suddenly turned sharp. And, this was even more surprising. Moreover, it gave people a feeling that he had a card up his sleeve. The matter between your sister and Tan Tan, there is no harm in putting it aside for now. Think about it again. Meng Chao Ran insipidly said, perhaps your Xie clan will change its mind in the future. Haha, the difference between an experienced Jianghu person and a youngster is that, no matter what happens, they won't do it to death. Leaving a way out, no matter when it was always necessary. What do you think, Elder Xie? Xiedan Qiong was silent for a long time. Then, he said, "As you wish, sir. I can't convince my sister now, no matter what the future will be. But, my sister's temper will come and go as quickly as it will come once they are separated. Perhaps, she will forget about it in 2 or 3 days." However, they didn't know that Meng Chaoran's intention was to separate from these people as soon as possible. Then, he would immediately return with Tan Tan. Meng Chaoran had a feeling that Tan Tan seemed to be stirring up something at the moment. And, a faint wind and clouds were gathering in the surroundings. If he continued to stay with these people, he was afraid that something big would happen. "Since that's the case, we'll take our leave first." Meng Chaoran chuckled. He cupped his hands and turned around. Then, without any hesitation, he prepared to leave. "Wait." Luo Kudi was dumbfounded and hurriedly called out. "You are Chu Yang's sworn brother, right?" Meng Chaoran warmly looked at Luo Kudi. "Yes." Luo Kedi greets senior. Luo Kudi knew that the person in front of him was Boss Chu's master. How could he dare to neglect him? He hurriedly bowed. "So, your senior martial brother's brother, no wonder, haha." Tan Tan excitedly said. "Well, we'll look for you 3 days after Chu Yang arrives." Meng Chaoran's voice was very hurried as he said, "But right now, I still have important matters to attend to, so I will take my leave for now." "Yes, senior, please go ahead." Luo Kudi scratched his head in bewilderment. He didn't know why Meng Chaoran had suddenly rejected him. But, he still forced a smile on his face. "Tan Tan, let's go." Meng Chaoran pulled Tan Tan and sped away. "Master." "Phone." Tan Tan was somewhat reluctant. "Go quickly." Meng Chaoran coldly shouted. Then, he sped up. He didn't take the main road. Instead, he entered a short forest like a meteor. Then, he disappeared in a flash. Xiedan Feng foolishly looked in the direction where Tan Tan had left. Her eyes were suddenly filled with tears. A strong sense of loss spontaneously arose in her heart. He left just like that. When will I see him again? "Little sister." Xiedan Qiong came to her side and called out in a soft voice. "Xiedan Qiong. I'm telling you. I'm not done with you." Xiedan Feng angrily looked at her brother. "You dare to meddle in my private affairs? Just you wait." Humph. She turned her head and walked away in a huff. Xiedan Qiong felt regretful. Meng Chaoran had left soon after. The Luo brothers had also bid farewell to Xiedan Qiong. Suddenly, a loud whistling sound came from afar. Then, a burst of sound came from all directions. It sounded as if 10,000 horses were galloping. Not good. Xiedan Qiong, Luo Kuwu, and Luo Kudi cried out in alarm. They turned their heads to look. And, they couldn't help but suck in a mouthful of cold air. They saw a flood of spirit beasts coming from 3 directions. They were so densely packed that they covered the entire mountain. There were first-level spirit beasts, second-level spirit beasts, third-level spirit beasts, fourth-level spirit beasts, and fifth-level spirit beasts. Don't tell me those spirit beasts are level spirit beasts. It seemed that tens of thousands of spirit beasts were covering the sky as they rushed over. "It's over." Xiedan Qiong and Luo Kuwu exposed a look of despair on their faces. The strength of the 2 clans was more than 1,300 people at best. But, they didn't have the strength to fight back in the face of so many spirit beasts. Moreover, these spirit beasts were high-end spirit beasts. In fact, they would be torn to shreds and devoured as long as the opposite party launched an attack. The experts of the 2 clans exposed a look of despair on their faces. Even the faces of the dozen or so king-level experts were filled with grief. Even an emperor-level expert would be considered lucky if he could escape with his life in the face of such a powerful spirit beast troop, let alone a king-level expert. "Oh my god. Xiedan Qiong, did you fucking dig up their ancestral graves? Or did you rape their empress? We brothers have been fucking implicated because of you." Luo Kudi opened his eyes wide. His complexion had turned snow-white. "Bullshit." Xiedan Qiong snappily replied, "I'm suspecting that you've lured them here. Don't talk about this anymore. Let's recuperate our spirits. We'll kill a few of them later, Luo Ku-wu said in a heavy voice. His eyes were full of unwillingness. Don't tell me that I, Luo Ku-wu, will die in the mouths of these spirit beasts. Those spirit beasts had already arrived in front of them. An indescribable smell of blood soared to the sky. Those ferocious and brutal eyes, and those snow-white sharp teeth, everyone unsheathed their swords at the same time. They were just waiting for the command to start the war. The spirit beasts suddenly raised their front hooves with a loud roar. They circled in the air, and landed on the ground motionlessly. They were less than 3 feet away from everyone. The crowd of spirit beasts behind them rolled and separated like a tide. More than a dozen people of the 3 Stars Divine clan walked over with their hands crossed behind their backs. These people were dressed in clean human clothes. They were brimming with the demeanor of experts as they walked out. Anyone would have thought that they were human experts if it weren't for the glittering starlight mark on their foreheads. Where are the people? Gu Yi swept his eyes over Xiedan Qiong and the rest of the people. He then slowly asked, "Who's there?" Luo Ku Di and Xiedan Qiong were stunned. He was clearly here, with them. "Honored sir, I can swear that I saw him." A strangely dressed man of the 3 Stars Divine clan came out from one side. He was the man who had fought with Xiedan Qiong. "A strange-looking guy was with you." Gu Yi looked at Xiedan Qiong and slowly asked, "Where is he now?" Everyone knew that he was asking about Tan Tan as soon as these words were spoken. "Why are you looking for him?" Xiedan Feng had already walked far away. But she came back when she heard them asking about Tan Tan. She bravely stepped forward. "Who are you?" Gu Yi's eyelids gently turned. He looked at Xiedan Feng with an extremely sharp gaze. He insipidly said, "Is it your turn to speak here?" Xiedan Feng became angry. "I'm his wife. You're asking me where my husband is, but I can't speak." More than a dozen people on the opposite side had a strange look on their faces as soon as these words came out. They looked at each other in dismay as if they had seen a ghost. "You're his wife?" The leader looked at Xiedan Feng with a strange look on his face. His mouth was strangely crooked. "Wife?" "Of course." Xiedan Feng's face turned red. But she still said in a rough voice, "How can this be fake?" "Good, good, good." This man stretched his voice. He said "good" 3 times as he sized up Xiedan Feng. The others also started to look from all directions. Xiedan Feng felt uncomfortable from head to toe. She was about to fly into a rage. "Where did he go?" The leader's voice had clearly softened a bit. "He left. But I won't tell you where he went." Xiedan Feng put her hands on her hips. "Why are you looking for him? Just tell me." A strange light flashed in that man's eyes. He looked Xiedan Feng up and down. Then, he nodded and said, "Good, good, 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 good my ass. Do you know how to say anything other than good?" Xiedan Feng became angry. She didn't care that her side was at a disadvantage. She valiantly scolded him. "Good, good, even better, very good." That man didn't feel offended. Instead, he faced upwards and laughed. He looked at Xiedan Feng again and said, "It's really good." Xiedan Feng was speechless. That man gently turned his head. He seemed to have said something. Then, he turned his head and said to Xiedan Feng, "Let's go look for him since he's not here." "Why are you looking for him?" Xiedan Feng nervously stepped forward. "I have a gift for you." That man smiled warmly. Then, his body flashed like lightning. He approached Xiedan Feng and patted her shoulder. Then, he flashed and retreated. Xiedan Qiong became furious. "What are you doing? Let go of my sister." He flew forward. However, that man had already retreated. He nodded and waved his hand. He said, "Since that's the case, I'll let these people go. Let's go." He suddenly floated up and waved his hands in the air. Then, he turned into a shooting star with a whoosh sound. Thousands of spirit beasts roared at the same time. They turned around and left with a rumbling sound. This place became tranquil in the blink of an eye. Not even a single spirit beast could be seen. Xiedan Qiong, Luo Ku-wu, and the others felt as if they were in a dream. They blinked their eyes and looked at each other. They were confused. The opposite party came with great momentum. But they left just like that. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.